Good evening, Wilmington. This meeting is now called to order. This is a joint meeting of the Community Development, Urban Planning, and the Finance and Economic Development Committee. So we got something special for you guys tonight. We have a pretty packed agenda for this evening, Wednesday, June 21st. I am the chair of the Finance Committee, Chris Johnson from the 7th District. Welcome, Wilmington, and thank you for being engaged and present. At this time, I'll call a member of the separate committees first. Chairwoman of Community Development, Maria Cabrera, she's excused for now. She is on the way. Council member Nathan Field, Vice Chair.
Present.
Council member McCoy, 6th District.
Here.
Council member Fields, 5th District. I
Present.
believe you have, all right. Councilmember Spadola at large.
Present.
Councilmember Darby's. Okay, and Council President Congo.
Present.
Here.
Okay, and now I'll call the members.
Madam, Mr. Chair, you left off a member.
I apologize. Is it Councilmember White?
That would be me.
Okay. So
I'm Councilmember White.
I had an old roster, so I apologize. Councilmember White, welcome.
First District.
Thank you. All right. And now I will be calling members of the Finance Committee. Vice Chair Harley, 4th District. Councilmember Bracy, at
Present.
large. Councilmember Field, 8th District.
Present.
Present. Councilmember Oliver, 3rd District.
Present.
And Councilmember Spadola at large.
Present again.
And Council President Congo is present as well.
Here.
All right, as a friendly reminder, only members of the specific committee items should be making motions and any seconding. We do have a packed agenda. I will give Chairwoman Cabrera a minute to get herself settled, but I just wanted to make a housekeeping announcement. It's very important. So agenda item number 6, which is ordinance 23-022, which is an ordinance to amend certain parking fines and penalties. That is going to be held tonight. The sponsor, Councilwoman Cabrera, will of course inform the public when the final changes will be made, and the item will be back on the agenda later this summer. So again, agenda item number 6, the parking ordinance is not going forward tonight. All right.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, you mentioned the committee members should only vote on such items that are in their respective committee?
Correct.
And how will they know that?
Well, that will be we will let you know, because certain items are not. We should have had it clearly marked, but we will let you know. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Bass
Yeah,
Knight.
and that's a good point. The only item that will be of the Finance Committee meeting is going to be the resolution authorizing a grant to United Way of Delaware. Everything else will be community development and urban planning.
And as
Thank you, Ms. Bass.
I believe Ms. Bass Knight, agenda item 6 would have been finance, but now that's off the agenda.
That's
So
out,
yeah,
that's
so
right.
Chairwoman Cabrera will of course be making sure she's counting the votes. And so I guess Councilwoman Cabrera is getting settled, but I will I believe. Okay. Well, so I believe we do have a presentation though. So I don't know if we have the individuals ready. Council Member Cabrera.
Yes, I can.
Excuse me. I'd like to ask to get the ordinances out the way first, since it's a long agenda. That makes sense to me.
Okay, well,
have-
we're going to go in order, and the presentation is going to be first, because we've already discussed the agenda at length with a few of the members of the committee. So is the presentation
Thanks for
ready?
being so rude, but thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm settled, thank you. Is the presentation ready to start? Because we don't want our guests to have to wait through this lengthy agenda. Thank you so much. And we will get through it quickly. You may proceed. Welcome, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you. I believe I sent slides. I'm not sure if they're able to be shared. I can also share my screen. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wilmington City Council. Really pleased to be here with you today and thankful for you for giving me some time on the agenda. So I'm here to talk a bit more about some work that we've done with Councilmember Darby through the Landlord Engagement Lab. I'm not sure if I've met all the folks on this call, but I gave a presentation maybe about 8 months ago on the Landlord Engagement Lab, a technical assistance program that we've launched in partnership with the Stanford Law School Legal Design Lab that aims to support cities and how they're engaging with their mom and pop landlords, how they're working to prevent evictions. So I'm here to talk a little bit more about kind of our thoughts and perspective, having worked with quite a few cities on rental license programs, rental registries, on potential ways to kind of update the rental or the RRPLIP. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to give a bit of a recap from our perspective, again, working with lots of cities who have rental license program, rental registry programs, about why a rental license program is important. This is always really kind of useful context setting of getting back to the why of why cities pass these types of policies and programs. So to know who owns property in your community, it sounds simple, but a lot of cities don't actually know who owns properties, who rents properties, who are landlords in their community or property managers, to be able to reach a responsible party when necessary, going to the life and safety of our tenants, of our neighborhoods, to have access to key information about the property, how many tenants are in there, so on and so forth, and to be able to schedule regular property inspections, to be able to reach tenants as well as the property owner or manager, kind of taking a step above to be able to track rents and affordability in the community, especially as cities are thinking to long-term planning. How are we able to keep track of trends in the rental markets in our communities, to track property performance and use code enforcement services more effectively? What we're seeing across the country is that more and more cities don't have the resources, don't have the capacity to be able to do this work, and are left kind of scrambling to, try to do a lot with limited resources. And then lastly, to identify and reward good landlords. Sometimes people are a bit hesitant when they hear that, but I think the antithesis of identifying and rewarding good landlords is being able to identify who our quote unquote bad actors are, or landlords who are not in compliant with city regulations. All this to say, why a rental license program is important. We want to be able to have a good database to be able to keep track of all the things I listed above, which of course a rental license program is kind of the key to help accomplish. So a bit of context setting, what we're seeing across the country of, the why. Next slide, please. So some common challenges that we see, running an effective license program can be really difficult. And what we're seeing is a lot of cities struggle to have high compliance rates. But the thing that we want to highlight is it does not necessarily have to be. So some of the common challenges that we see, as I mentioned, low compliance rates. So, 40, 50, 60% of properties are registered. What's happening in the other 60% of properties in the city, diminishing kind of trust between landlords, renters, and local government. If only certain landlords are being subjected to the requirements under a license, what about the actors or the landlords that are quote unquote flying under the radar? Renters are living in potentially substandard or dangerous units. This is a lot of really kind of serious health and safety consequences. And as I mentioned earlier, when a rental license program isn't run effectively, quote unquote, bad actors fly under the radar, and that really kind of undermines the community's, housing stock, rental housing stock. And to go into what goes wrong, a lot of what we've seen and we've heard in our conversations with community members, one of the main challenges that they run into, inefficient processes can often lead into, slow application approvals or denials. I think this ties into the next point. using outdated software or technology. I think I'm speaking to folks who can commiserate, but oftentimes cities are kind of slower in adopting new technologies or softwares that meet kind of new needs, and especially when it comes to a rental license program, there's a lot of data that kind of underlies that work. So thinking about ways that we can kind of update processes, update software to make sure that we're keeping up with the demands of a rental license program, moving from a reactive to a proactive form of code enforcement, tying into the rental license program. And so cities aren't, playing whack-a-mole. Instead, they're staying on top of things, aren't constantly trying to kind of keep up with the tidal wave, so to speak. And then lastly, there's oftentimes little or no enforcement mechanism for non-compliant landlords. Either the city isn't reaching out to landlords that they presume are not compliant, either in the requirements of the rental licenses or even applying to the rental license in the first place. And again, cities are kind of left in the dark trying to catch up with all of those non-compliant landlords. So those are some of the common challenges that we have seen. Next slide, please. Thank you. And in terms of overcoming common challenges, again, these are things that we've seen and heard and worked with cities on. So on the point of inefficient processes, slow application processes, to really kind of work on simplifying application processes. We've taken a look at application processes for lots of rental license programs, and oftentimes they ask questions that maybe aren't necessary. There's ways to simplify language to make an application easier, to make it more likely for a landlord to fill it out. Also digitizing in application processes. A lot of cities are currently using, still paper-based forms that landlords must mail in. Of course, having a paper-based option is still important to capture landlords that may not be tech savvy, may not have access to internet, but as much as possible that we're offering both options. Digitizing the application process also means that the data processing, analysis, and collection can be more automated if we're digitizing the first kind of entry point of the information. This leads into the next point about outdated software and technology. We're seeing a lot of cities have really great success with contracting with third-party platforms or companies who can automate both the data processing and the enforcement of a rental license program. In terms of moving from a reactive to a proactive form of enforcement, moving from a one-size-fits-all approach, knowing that not all landlords are the same, to a more targeted approach. So if there are problem properties, how are we dedicating our resources specifically to those properties that we presume to be problematic versus ones that we know have a track record of actually being compliant with city regulations? Lack of enforcement leads to uneven playing field. Again, to my point earlier, not all landlords are the same. How are we, and I'm going back to my earlier point, rewarding good landlords and making sure that we're kind of focusing our time and attention on quote unquote bad actors or landlords that are not in compliance and helping them bring them into compliance. Next slide, please. And just to briefly highlight a few examples, I won't go into a lot of detail because I know I have limited time, but I wanted to highlight two cities. Oftentimes, folks will think that in order to have a really well-functioning rental license program that you need to be a large city with lots of resources. That actually is not the case. So I've highlighted two examples here specifically of cities that are, relatively low in population. Brookline Center, Minnesota, population 33,000. They've had a rental license program for a few decades now, I think, at this point. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere in the 90s they had it passed. And they more recently moved to a performance-based inspection system, pointing to be able to reward good landlords and ensure that non-compliant properties are identified and, again, given the resources and attention to bring them up to code. Another city to highlight, Hagerstown, Maryland. They hired a third-party platform to help automatically identify non-compliant properties. So through contracting with the private platform, they were able to consolidate many different data sets and essentially build an indicator through which they could identify which properties they suspected to be non-compliant so that city resources could be used more effectively, so to speak. So staff time could go automatically to talking to those properties where we have reasonable evidence to suspect that they are not compliant and help bring them into code. And then through that work, they were able to generate money through fees, save staff time, so on and so forth. Next slide, please. This is just to go a bit more into Brookline Center, Minnesota's performance-based inspection system. So they have 4 different property or types under which properties and landlords can be identified. I won't go into detail here, but you can essentially see that there are different requirements under the license program based on what type of property you are. So let's look at inspections, for instance. If you're a type 1 property, you know, maybe you've had a good track record, you only need an inspection for every 3 years. That's an incentive to, you know, be in compliant, work with the city, get all your paperwork done, so on and so forth. If you are a quote unquote problem property or problem landlord, whatever you want to call them, you know, you're then going to have inspections every 6 months to make sure that we're actually bringing those properties where most of the issues are happening up to code. So that's just to give an example of a city that has a pretty well-functioning performance-based inspection system and kind of how they've really laid it out in a lot of detail. So next slide, please. And then lastly, some recommendations or thoughts, thinking specifically about Wilmington's program, ways to kind of improve maybe the compliance rate, the effectiveness, so on and so forth of the rentals license program. Again, this is going back to a lot of the points that I made earlier that we've seen through our work with cities, but being able to simplify and digitize the actual application itself, which makes integrating data with other existing systems much easier, considering moving towards a performance-based system, offering carrots, this is more generally speaking, but offering carrots, not just sticks. So these incentives can be both financial, non-financial, can go back to my point about having a performance-based system. That's certainly a form of a carrot and a stick. And then also finally considering contracting with third-party platform to help streamline a lot of the processes that go into running a rental license program on the back end. We've heard cities have a lot of success with that. And ultimately what we've seen is that all of these kind of amendments can ultimately be cost-saving measures, both for the city in terms of resources and dollars spent, and then also with the community in terms of the quality of their housing and the tenant experience in properties in the city. Next slide, please. And with that, I believe the next slide is my last slide. I will pause. I'm not sure if there's time for questions, but I'm happy to answer any. And I'm also happy to drop my email in the chat box to talk to folks afterwards. I will pass it back to, I believe, Councilmember Cabrera.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tina, for that presentation. Obviously, this is a challenge that many cities go through, and ours is not unique to it. One of the things that we are trying to get a better handle is as making sure that all our rental properties are registered as well as being compliant. So we are definitely open to these ideas, suggestions. Obviously, a member of National League of Cities. We know that there's a lot of good research in working with cities across America, and you bring best practices to the table. So this is something that I would have our L&I commissioner take a look at. And at this point, I can open it up to any members of council who have any questions. Councilmember Darby?
I don't have too many questions, as I've been hearing the recommendations and the research and best practices and working with the Landlord Engagement Lab. But I just want to say thank you, Tina, and I hope that the city of Wilmington is willing to move forward with the recommendations that has been set forward as you've been working with the Wilmington team, which consists of landlords, renters, community advocates from the city of Wilmington, and property managers who are concerned about housing and how we deal with landlords in the city. So I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I hope that my council people will take this in, and when it's time for us to apply our online registry, our portal platform, whatever we want to call it, that we have a lot of support for this, because there are cost savings. And it will make the lives of our constituents better by just having one simple program. It will contribute to making it a better experience for constituents to live here in Wilmington. So thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. Any other council members? Not seeing any hands raised, Ms. Lee. We will definitely circle back with you. We thank you for being here today and for this presentation. And definitely, we will be working with our administration and our license and inspection department to see how we can take some of these recommendations and implement them here. Do we have another?
Thank you so much.
A hand? Oh, okay, so now before, oh, I'm sorry, before you leave, we do want to see if there's any other questions out there. We do have Councilmember Harley, and recognizing that she has joined the meeting and she is a member of the Finance Committee. Is that whose hand is raised?
Nobody else saying this.
Okay, no,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
you're welcome. Okay, well, that's it, Ms. Lee. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, we will now proceed with council member and chair of the Finance Committee, Chris Johnson, who will present his resolution.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairwoman. I want to present item number 1 on the agenda, which is a resolution authorizing a grant to the United Way. This is required because it is an amount over $5,000, and is asking. We're actually looking at a matching situation where the mayor would be committing $25,000, and then council will be matching that as well. This is coming at urgent need. We've been contacted by the executive director of United Way, Ms. Michelle Taylor, about the urgent need to preserve the city's youth programming. There's academic programming that is at risk of being cut, and this would impact more than 1,000 city youth, and also 15 Wilmington community-based organizations. So to say the least, this is very urgent that this be put forth, as unfortunately there were some cuts in the state funding, and so the city, we're stepping up to fill the gap. So then this is for summer programming, it's for out-of-school programming, and it's much needed, so we keep our youth engaged this summer. So I hope it has the support of all of council. Is there anyone from the administration here to just speak briefly on this request? I have Chief of Staff Tanya Washington.
Yes, Tanya Washington, Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office. We are in support of granting funding to the United Way. We actually have Mr. Dan Cruz here from the United Way to speak to the program, if you give him opportunity.
All right, and I'm sorry, Mr. Cruz, I did not see you here. I apologize. So, yes, if you could be present, that would be great. Mr. Cruz, you can sit. Thank you. First, if you could introduce yourself for the record, and if anyone's here with you today, you can introduce them as well, and just let us know. Again, I know on council, but some of us don't know, and then also the public. You're speaking to Wilmington, so can you talk about the programming?
Sure. Just on behalf of the Board of Directors of the United Way of Delaware, our United Way team, and all the partners that we work with, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. My name is Dan Cruz. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the United Way. I have my colleague Tiara Fair behind me, maybe over my left shoulder. I can't quite see behind me, who's our Vice President of Engagement and Partnerships with me as well. She's close to the work as I am. I'm happy to share a few comments with you to color in the request tonight, and then also happy to take questions if that would be helpful. The request that we have tonight, you did a very eloquent job doing my part there. We have a gap filling opportunity in front of us. We have programs that we invest in from United Way across the city of Wilmington. The funding from national and state level has been reduced in significant ways. We also have the opportunity to continue some of our investments in those programs that are not unique to the individual program. So from the United Way perspective, part of our business model is as individual organizations do terrific work, we match those investments, and then we also do things that individually those organizations and programs would not be able to do. So if you think about common themes that our families and our students face across the city, from technology access, bringing together the adults that work with our youth and convening them, providing individual tools to map and chart the growth of our students, during the summertime, and also to identify the unique characteristics that aren't a test score that are really important for our individuals that work with our youth, to chart what they need and make certain that Dan's getting what he needs, which might be different than Tierra. We call that developmental assets. So we partner and bring that to all of our partners. BookNook is the academic tool that I spoke about a moment ago too, and we bring those investments to our investment partners, as well as monetary investments as well. So we have a few gaps that we're trying to close, and as everybody knows, I'm preaching to the choir, the needs from our families and our youth have only been exacerbated. I don't want to say post-COVID, some folks are saying that, but we are moving farther away from that. That simply means that we have even more families now that are at that point where these programs are even more pivotal. So I appreciate your consideration and happy to talk or have any conversation.
All right. Any comments from members of council? Council member? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, and I do see the folks on Zoom. I apologize. I'm going to do the folks in the room first. So Councilmember Oliver, floor is yours.
No, Dan, thank you for the brief comments. I wanted to say, United Way has proven itself in more than 1,000 ways, so I don't think this is a long conversation. It was a pleasure to make a donation. If I need to make more, I will. And y'all continue the good work you're doing throughout the state of Delaware. Thank you.
Appreciate that. We all appreciate that.
Any comments or questions from members in chambers? Councilmember Bracy.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor. I echo Councilwoman Oliver's sentiments. I'm glad to be able to help with this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very well. Chairwoman.
Yes, I too would like to be added as a co-sponsor, and I do believe that council has been reached out to, and that we also will be making our own individual donations out of the ARPA funds that we have. You can count on my support as well. Thank you for everything that United Way has done. I think of all the organizations that we interact with, that United Way provides funding and touches all our lives as individuals, and especially in our community. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. We are but a collective, so we appreciate the comments, but it's a reflective of the partners that we work with.
And I wanted to note for the record, Councilmember Oliver wishes to be added as a co-sponsor as well. Councilmember McCoy?
Same.
Okay.
I was like, saying, just wanted to make certain that I'm added as a co-sponsor, and also just like to point out that not only did we match the mayor, we were able to go a little further. So glad to help.
Yes, indeed.
Had to say that, didn't you?
Yes,
So-
I had to say that.
If I can jump in, does that mean we go back to the mayor's office? Is that how this is finance, right?
Where's the auctioneer?
And then I'm going to go to members on Zoom. Thank you for being patient. Councilmember Darby.
Yes, thank you. No, thank you to United Way for all the work that you guys do in the community. But I do have a question. It's probably not for United Way, because when I looked at the agenda yesterday, Monday and yesterday, this was not on here. So this has been a new occurrence for me in understanding, I guess, where the funds are coming from exactly from city council money.
So that may be a question for Ms. Marshall Basnight. I can say an urgent email was circulated to council yesterday regarding the nature of this request. Again, this is literally within the past 48 hours we learned about this, so it is an
Yeah, that's what I'm
emergency
saying.
matter.
It's new. So I'm new to this information, so I'm trying to understand where the funds are coming from.
Okay, it's my understanding, Ms. Basnight can clarify it, is a portion of our community investment funds through ARPA. So we have the individual council accounts, as you're aware. So those who have funds left over who would like to share those funds with United Way, that's where the pot of money, I believe, would be coming from. And Ms. Basnight, you can maybe clarify.
Yes, so the funds are coming from, as you stated, Chairman Johnson, from the special community support funds that was funded by ARPA, and or can come from councilperson's discretionary funds.
I know my money is almost gone though.
Councilperson Darby, Councilmember Darby, yes, different councilpersons' fundings is at different levels, and as I said, it can also come from councilpersons' discretionary funds, because come July 1st, 2024, the new budget starts, and council gets new allocations of funding as well.
Yes, I have a question. So if this passes, are you taking money from all of us or just from certain people who agree to it?
The funds will come, Chairman, if I may?
Yes, yes.
The funds will come from those who say that they would like to provide funds. So how we got to the 28,500 figure is because councilpersons has agreed to do that amount. If other councilpersons want to take that number up even greater, that can be done as well.
Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just confirming. I didn't know if you guys are just, I guess, trying to tell me what I could do with my ARPA funds. But no, that's fine with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Vice Chair Hartley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to just chime in to, one, be a co-sponsor on this resolution. I had the opportunity to talk to Michelle this morning on another topic, and of course, we were able to talk a little more about this particular need, and I was able to get more context around the need. And I just want to also say that United Way has been a great partner to the city of Wilmington. They have been an integral part, a main stakeholder as it relates to helping children and families in so many spaces. And so when we received the email, I never remember getting an email from United Way as a council member. So I thought that the need must have been very urgent. And it was, it was refreshing to have that conversation with her. And I'm really happy to be able to make my commitment. I made my commitment earlier this morning from my personal funds to be a part of this collective. And I really appreciated her just sharing with me how their model is really collective and how United Way believe that, we are better together and many hands make light work. And as Dan said, how when we partner and how we put all of our money together, we are able to help more children and families here in the city of Wilmington and in the state of Delaware. So I'm happy to be a co-sponsor, and I'm also happy to make my commitment and to say thank you to Dan and to the board and to United Way. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Vice Chair. And Councilmember Fields.
Yes, thank you. Can I just be added as a co-sponsor?
Yes.
Thank you.
So noted. All right, and just turn to the members of the public. Any public comments or questions? All right. Seeing none, then I'll turn it back to council. Is there any final comments or questions? Again, thank you very much, Mr. Cruz and Ms. Fair, for being here, and of course, Dr. Taylor as well. Thank you for getting this letter over to us. People always say government works slow, which it normally does. But in this circumstance, we actually are moving lightning speed. So that's part of what my vision as finance chair actually has been, that we have, since Adams Street, I think we've learned about that we need some funds that are available that we can get to community and urgent needs. And so that's what we've done on this council. So again, thank you to the administration for working with us and allowing us to partner on this. And this is a resolution, so it does not need to be voted. And I believe it will be in the council agenda on July 16th. 6. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you.
Ms. Washington. All right. And I believe now we will turn it back over to Community Development Urban Planning portion. Chairwoman Cabrera will take over.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda that we're going to address is number 23-028, an ordinance to rezone 7 parcels of land located along Lincoln Street between 10th and 11th Streets from a zoning classification of R-3, one-family row house, to a zoning classification of C-2. And the sponsor is Councilman Johnson, so I'll turn it over to you to speak on this.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairwoman. This is an ordinance that's a long time coming. We have, anybody who's familiar with the West Side Corridor, We have a lot of mixed-use zones. We have residential zones. We have commercial zones. Some are zoned for just, homes when it really should be businesses. And that's this section of Lincoln Street we have where it used to just be mainly homes and apartments. But over time, there's been more and more small businesses and minority businesses that are there. And we're looking to expand the opportunities in that zone as we are throughout the west of the West Side. We're trying to expand economic opportunity. As you've been tracking, we've had a lot of ribbon cuttings in the West Side recently, just one last week, a beauty salon. So really, there's a lot of energy, and so we're looking forward to moving this forward and that we're able to rezone this parcel and give more opportunity, because if you have this designation as a C2, that often raises your property value. So if you're looking to sell a property, having it rezoned that commercial allows you to market this at a higher rate. So again, I believe it's a win-win, and I hope council is fully supportive of this. At this time, I'll turn it to any members of council. Do they have questions, comments?
I would like to be added as a co-sponsor, and I think that as our neighborhoods do change, we do need to change the zoning so we can move forward and allow for opportunity. I think that businesses within neighborhoods are great. I've always loved little corner, cafes and markets and things like that, and little restaurants right in your neighborhood that you can just pop out and go get something to eat or drink. So I definitely want to be added as a co-sponsor and very much in support of this. I do believe that the necessary signatures from the community, everyone in that area is in favor. So we did not hear from any constituents with any opposition. So I think we should be good to go.
And I apologize, there is Gwen from Planning Department is on. Was there a comment from Planning Department?
Matt?
We have a presentation if you're interested.
Okay, if you could do the presentation first. I apologize, I didn't, because you're not in the room, I didn't realize you were there, thank you. So if you wouldn't mind going to the presentation as well, just briefly, then we can go back to council.
Matt?
We're ready when you are, Gwen.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Gwyneth Kaminsky with the Department of Land Use and Planning, and I'm presenting for Ordinance 23-28, which would rezone 7 parcels of land along Lincoln Street. Next slide. May I have the next? There you go. This zoning action was prompted by a request from Johnny Oruela with Yuri Properties LLC to rezone 2 parcels of land. The first is located at 1010, 1012, 1014, and 1018 Lincoln Street. The building includes the Three Amigos Mexican Grill on the first floor and the 2 upper story apartments. And the second parcel is located at 1008 Lincoln Street, where a single-family dwelling and an accessory parking lot are located. The property owner for Three Amigos received permission from the Zoning Board of Adjustment to expand this non-conforming restaurant use on the first floor, but they did not receive permission to allow the sale of alcohol because it would constitute a change of land use. Instead, the Zoning Board recommended that the property owner seek a rezoning. The owner submitted a rezoning request for C2 secondary business centers zoning for the 2 parcels because under C2, the non-conforming status of the restaurant and the apartments would be eliminated, and the C2 would permit the sale of alcohol for on-site consumption at the restaurant. Next slide, please. After reviewing other land uses in the immediate area, it was determined by planning that 5 additional parcels should be included in the rezoning action to address issues with other non-conforming uses in the neighborhood. The yellow area on the slide shows the additional parcels. The Three Amigos site is circled in red, and these 7 properties are located adjacent to a larger C2 district. Next slide, please. Current land uses on the 7 affected parcels include 4 single-family residential dwellings, auto-related uses, commercial storage, restaurant with the 2 upper-story apartments, and accessory parking. The 4 single-family dwellings are matter of right uses, and the other uses are non-conforming under the current R3 zoning. Next slide, please. Land uses surrounding the affected rezoning site include a mixed-use commercial corridor along Union Street with restaurants, retail, personal services, and business uses, and auto dealerships and related service centers along Pennsylvania Avenue between Union and Clayton Streets. The surrounding residential neighborhoods include single-family, semi-detached, and row house dwellings, along with compatible institutional uses such as churches and schools. A large park sits below 10th Street between Lincoln and Scott Streets. Next slide, please. This slide compares the types of permitted uses allowed in the existing and proposed zoning districts. The current R3 one-family row house district is designed to retain areas already developed with single-family row houses which have not been converted for use by 2 or more families. The district permits single-family, semi-detached, and row house dwellings, institutional uses, schools, and other compatible uses. The proposed C2 secondary business centers district is designed to provide both shopping and business needs for the larger segment of the city outside of the central business district, including secondary employment centers, and also allows for residential development. Next slide, please. No negative impacts will result from the rezoning. The rezoning from R3 to C2 removes the non-conforming status of a number of uses. For Three Amigos, the non-conforming restaurant and accessory parking, as well as the upper story apartments, would become matter of right uses under C2. The rezoning will also permit the sale of alcohol for on-site consumption at the restaurant. The commercial uses, such as storage, the auto-related service and repair, they will become matter of right under C2. The 4 single-family dwellings will remain a matter of right under the proposed C2 zoning with no impact. Once rezoned, all new future development on these 7 parcels would be required to conform to the C2 regulations. Next slide. To move forward with the proposed zoning action, the city's comprehensive development plan entitled Wilmington 2028, a comprehensive plan for our city and communities, must first be amended. The rezoning area is located in the West Side neighborhood, and the West Side future land use map currently indicates medium-density residential land use for the rezoning area, which is consistent with the existing R3 zoning. It is recommended, however, to change the land use category from medium-density residential to neighborhood mixed uses, which is consistent with the proposed C2 zoning. Next slide, please. Notice for the June City Planning Commission meeting included a letter to the affected property owners and interested parties, was sent on June 7th. The meeting agenda, which was sent out on June 12th, and a classified legal advertisement of the public hearing, which was published June 12th in the News Journal. The rezoning ordinance was introduced at the June 15th meeting of City Council by the sponsor, Councilmember Chris Johnson, and public hearings for the rezoning and the comp plan amendment have been scheduled for July 13th. Next slide, please. Councilmember Johnson and Director Starkey reached out to the affected property owners on site to discuss the proposed rezoning action and its impacts. Director Starkey was informed this past weekend that the property owner of 1008 Lincoln Street did not wish to be included in the rezoning action. 1008 Lincoln includes the restaurant parking lot and the single-family home shown on the slide. The parcel in question is shown circled in red on the map. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission held its public hearing yesterday to consider the original proposal to rezone 7 parcels of land. At that time, they were provided an alternative proposal which reflects the request to remove 1008 Lincoln from the rezoning action. The commission chose to approve the alternative proposal, revised resolution 3-23, removing 1008 Lincoln Street from consideration, which results in the rezoning of 6 parcels of land, not 7. Eliminating 1008 Lincoln from zoning consideration will still result in the desired outcome for the applicant, Three Amigos Grill, namely the ability to serve alcohol. The parking lot at 1008 Lincoln would remain a legal non-conforming use, and the single-family home remains matter of right under the existing R3 zoning, which wouldn't change. The Planning Commission also recommended that the West Side future land use map be amended accordingly via revised resolution 2-23 to allow for neighborhood mixed-use land use on the 6 rather than 7 parcels in question to support the C2 zoning. Finally, the Commission recommends to City Council that a substitute to Ordinance 23-028 be prepared to reflect the revised rezoning action that they approved, which deletes tax parcel 26-02030-041 from consideration. In summary, as recommended by the zoning board, this rezoning serves to expand a large C2 commercial zoning district that exists to the north, while eliminating the current non-conforming status of various commercial and apartment uses that exist under the current R3 zoning. And it was my understanding from the law department that if you are going to vote the ordinance and resolution out of committee this evening, it needs to be a substitute version that reflects the Planning Commission's revised resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any members of council that have any questions? Councilmember McCoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question, looking at this map, I'm curious to find out 1020 and 1022, they were both in agreement. Those homes look like they were never businesses. And I was just wondering how did they fall into this rezoning?
Ms. Gwen, can you answer that, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I'm having trouble.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll repeat. So, Ms. Gwen, what I was asking was, the address is 1020 and 1022 on Lincoln Street. From my recollection, those homes have never been businesses. I was wondering how are they falling into the rezoning?
Those homes are not included in the rezoning. They are actually within the C2 district, and they will not be affected by this rezoning action.
Okay, thank you for
And
clarifying
they
that.
do appear as single-family homes without businesses.
I must have looked at it confusing me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other members of community development that are here present that have a question? All right, otherwise, we'll go on to Councilmember Fields.
Yes, I just want to be a co-sponsor, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields. And any other members of council? We have Councilmember Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question to Gwen was, I'm not familiar with the Three Amigos like that. So you said that it was rezoned so they're able to sell alcohol. Could you repeat that? That was the only question I had regarding the alcohol.
Sure. The use right now, the restaurant use is a non-conforming use, and they are not permitted to sell alcohol under the existing R3 zoning. They went to the zoning board for permission to expand their non-conforming use and to sell alcohol. The zoning board allowed them to expand, but rejected their request to sell alcohol because they felt it would change the use under R3 and would not be appropriate. So the zoning board recommended that they really needed a zoning change to commercial where they would be allowed to sell alcohol and they would be a permitted use. So that is why they have petitioned for the rezoning, so that they could, in fact, be a matter of right use and sell alcohol on the site for consumption on the site.
As a please, I'm not finished. As a follow-up,
Yes, you may follow up.
so, Ms. Gwen, so you're telling me the zoning board recommended them to change it to commercial so they're allowed to sell alcohol? Is that what you just said?
Yes, because that is what they petitioned the zoning board for, and they were rejected.
That's all, thank you.
Question?
But I believe the.
Can we have,
the
yeah, Mr.
attorney
Goff?
Bob-
I just wanted to correct the record a little bit.
Excuse me.
Okay, Mr. Goff is coming forward, and then Mr. White, go ahead, you can ask your question.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct the record while it was fresh, and I apologize if I interrupted anyone at all. The only point I would make is that the zoning board did grant the expansion of the restaurant use as described here, but we did not reach a decision on the use variance portion of this, which would have granted the alcohol. There's binding Delaware Supreme Court precedent, which says that adding alcohol to this restaurant use constitutes a different use. The standard for use variance is greater. So our thought was, rather than render a decision for the applicant, which may not be in their favor, that this area of the town seemed more like a commercial area and more appropriate for a zoning change. So I reached out to council and asked that council consider that, and the planning commission consider that. So I just wanted to correct the record a little bit. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman White?
No question.
Councilman
So, thank you.
Oliver?
And I guess that answers my question.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And Councilmember Fields?
Yes, I just want to make one comment. I've been to Three Amigos quite a few times, and they seem their restaurant is very clean. And I've actually sat back there in that back part where they want to have the alcohol, and it's a really nice setup. And I'm just kind of glad that council decided to take this up and move forward with possibly allowing them to serve alcohol on the premises. I know that it will bring more economic revenue into the district as well. So that's why I'm in full support of it. I met the owner a few times when I went there. So I just hope that council would give it their full support. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields.
One last question.
Councilmember Oliver?
Yes, if the petitioners are in here, could they stand up? I've never seen them or met them before. Okay, thank you.
I was going to ask if you wanted to make any comments. If you, please feel free to come forward. Herdman. Just state your name and you may proceed.
Yes, my name is Germán Barron. I'm one of the Three Amigos, and thank you for giving me the chance to speak here. And yeah, we opened last year, and we're trying to create more job, make it like more pretty in the area, you know. We need, sell alcohol because right now the inflation for all the food and all the things we need for cook is going up, and we don't have enough money to keep keeping our employees. Now the alcohol would help with keep us opening, because we can pay rent and we can pay more people to the restaurant, you know.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anybody?
I did have a question, Armand.
Armand, don't leave yet,
Just to state for the
Armand.
record,
Stay put, amigo.
in your ownership group, you purchased the building, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I was
Yeah.
about to ask.
Mhm. Yeah. Good.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions before I turn it over to the sponsor?
Yes, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, President. And
I just
Councilmember
have
Bracy?
also have a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Council President.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad that we are finally in a position to be able to help the owners of Three Amigos. This was a long time coming, a very frustrating process for the owners. Hopefully that's, somehow as the city, we're able to guide them in a, I guess, an easier.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, I have one thing to say.
Yes,
I would
Councilmember
hope
Oliver.
that, thank you. I would hope that we would take the look at this process and help Lena that's on Shipley Street in the same manner, because I've been listening closely. I was at her bar last night on Shipley Street, and I just wanted to make sure I had to say that I couldn't hold it any longer. Thank you.
And I appreciate everyone's comments and Armand and his family for coming. I think it's showing again that we're a very inclusive city. Armand did not tell his whole story, but he came from us from Mexico only a few short years ago and has really built businesses and expanded opportunities for folks in Wilmington. So I appreciate Armand and your family for adding to the fabric of our city. And as Councilmember Oliver said, this is a learning experience for me. It's the first time I've actually had to do this on council. I think it's actually good that unfortunately, we had this come up, but we can learn now and expand this throughout the city and revamp this process, and we know how to do it. So I know there's other business owners who are struggling as well, and we aim to assist them. Well, we have someone from law department. Was there anything? Okay, I'm not sure what that was about. But I just wanted to, so as a matter of fact, we do need to present this as a substitute ordinance, substitute 1 to ordinance 23-028, and the substitution would be an actual ordinance taking the deletion of the tax parcel, strike through the tax parcel 26020.30041, which is 10008 Lincoln Street. So that would be deleted from the ordinance in all places where it's referenced. All right, and with that, this is an ordinance, so it needs to be voted out of committee.
Okay, before.
Yes,
be-
Madam Chair.
Oh, it would need to be moved.
Okay, excuse me, but before we vote on this, I'm sorry.
Sorry, did you make a motion?
Well, I will. I didn't
What's
formally-
going on is that, as mentioned by Gwen, before we can even move this, we have to change the development, we have to adopt the city comprehensive development plan. We have to introduce that and then do the ordinance. Is that what needs to happen?
I
If not,
don't
we can
believe,
proceed.
I think we can proceed with this,
Okay,
and then
all
we
right,
have
that's
to
fine.
pass that
Just
as
wanted to
well.
make sure
So
we're going in
at this
order.
time, I would move to substitute
Point of order,
ordinance.
Madam Chair.
Yeah,
The
Ms.
the
White.
instructions were, who, are members of the committee making this motion or non-members of the committee making this motion? I thought only committee members can make the motion.
Right.
Correct. So we will make a motion that we vote on an ordinance to rezone 7 parcels of land located along Lincoln Street between 10th and 11th Streets from a zoning classification of R3, one-family row houses, to a zoning classification of C-2.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded.
Well, did,
somebody has
I
to
think
move
I
it,
heard
somebody
the
has to second.
president say that he had something to say.
I think the motion's already.
The motion's already on the floor.
Well, we didn't have a second yet.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Harley. That's fine. I'll save my comments for the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, it has been properly, no, did we get a first? Did we get a move?
Yes.
Well, now I'll move it. I'll move it.
Okay, so it has been properly moved and second. All in favor, respond with saying aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
She can't,
There was-
I know she can't move it, I've
Yeah.
already moved it.
She's moved it and seconded by Vice Chair Field.
Sorry. Somebody has to
If
move
she's
it.
not on the committee, then
Okay,
how can she
Nathan-
make a motion?
The motion's on the floor. Nathan
who-
was the first one, and I need a second.
I second it.
Second.
Thank you. It has been properly moved and second. The first was Nathan Field, Councilman Field, and Councilmember Fields. Now, all in favor, respond by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you. It has been properly moved in second, and it will be in one of the council meetings in the first or second Thursday of July when we will be meeting.
If
Yes.
you can I just want to just affirm that it be substitute number 1 to ordinance number 23028 for the July 13th council agenda.
So July 13th, it will be at
Yes.
the council meeting. Thank you. The next is the accompany resolution approving an amendment to the city's comprehensive development plan entitled Wilmington 2028, a comprehensive plan for our city and communities regarding 7 parcels of land located along Lincoln Street between 10th and 11th Streets to change the future land use category of such parcels from medium-density residential to neighborhood mixed use in relation to the proposed rezoning of such parcels. Again, Councilmember Johnson, you may proceed.
Okay. This is, don't really have any further comments. I think Gwen, the planning department put it perfectly as why we need the expanded amendment to the city planning in order to, again, expand opportunities on the west side and neighborhood zone. So appreciate everyone's support so we can get this over the finish line.
Thank you. First, we will take questions from members of the Community Development and Urban Planning Committee.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify this resolution. It is 7 parcels. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the resolution is not 7.
It's 6.
So, in point of order, that we can't move along that resolution unless it's been edited to change to 6.
Oh,
I believe, Ms. Bass Knight,
Yes, as Gwen has shared, that, this here needs to be amended as well to change to 6 parcels, to change that same parcel that was removed in the previous ordinance. She mentioned that both of these have to be amended.
Okay, we can proceed.
okay? So it really just, again, a companion piece to the first part. And was there, I believe Gwen has a,
Madam
go
Chair,
ahead. You can-
Madam Chair, then is there a motion required to change this to 7 before discussion?
We're going to allow Ms. Gwen to speak, and then that will take place, just like we had to make the changes on the former one. Go ahead, Ms. Gwen.
I just wanted to clarify that the resolution does need to be amended. It currently reflects the change of land use to 7 parcels, and that would need to be amended down to the 6 parcels, deleting the same parcel that was deleted from the ordinance. And we are amending this plan to support the proposed C2 zoning because the zoning action must be in conformance with the plan. So it's a companion piece of legislation, and it does in fact need to be amended before moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Members
Madam-
of the committee first will be called upon, and then others, council members, and then members of the public. Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Gwen, if you wouldn't mind repeating the parcel number once more that we will be deleting. Were you able to hear me?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. I said, would you mind repeating the parcel number that we will be omitting once more?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
This again is 1008 Lincoln, and the parcel number is 26-020.30-041. And that is the same parcel that you deleted from the ordinance.
Thank you.
And Ms. Gwen, I hate to ask you to do that again, but I'm writing it down. It's 1008 Lincoln Street, you said? 26-02.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
26-020.30-041.
Got it. It's just missing one O. Thank you. Are there any other members from the Community Development and Urban Planning Committee that has any questions? If not, I will proceed to other council members. And Councilmember Harley, you may proceed.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to apologize for moving that legislation. I'm looking at the agenda and it's not real clear to me, like which legislation is in finance and which is in your committee. So I apologize. I did not realize that. So I just wanted to be on record. I'm not trying to intercept or anything like that. I want to always be in order. So I wanted to apologize. Thank you,
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Harley. No apologies were needed. We did state that the only thing that the Finance Committee will be voting on is the resolution to grant for the grant for the United Way. So just to clarify, that was the only finance issue. Everything else will be community development. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the public now? Does the council president have any comments or questions? Okay.
Fields.
Oh, Councilmember Fields?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Madam Chair. I just want to know, once, how long is it going to take for this to go through, and then they can start working on their, once the rezoning is in, or how long is it going to take for the city to do the rezoning? And then once they do the rezoning, how long will it take for the business to start being able to sell alcohol on the premises?
Okay, so you want to know when you can have your margarita, basically.
Don't
So
drink
at this
margaritas.
point, we're going to have Commissioner Jeff Starkey is going to come forward to talk about the process and the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once the ordinance is passed and the rezoning is solidified, then they can proceed with the, it'll be a conforming use at that point. So they can proceed with their application to the ABC.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
No, that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We will both be drinking margaritas soon.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a comment.
And the council president will join us.
I'd like to make a statement.
Councilmember Oliver would have.
Yes, I'd like to make a statement for Chief of Staff for Marshall. Some of the resolutions in the ordinance have the numbers on them, and some of them don't, so it's a little confusing, so I understand what Councilman Hardy. So normally, all of them are stamped to say what ordinance or resolutions on them, and some of them do and some of them don't. So it's no fault of ours, it's staff that's not stamped in these resolutions, so it looks a little confusing, just to help Councilwoman Hardy out. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're not a bunch of crazy council members up here. There's
Thank
a
you.
lot on this agenda.
A lot of paper.
Thank you.
It's
A
our
lot of
first
paper,
time.
but, yeah,
It's our
thank you
first
so
time
much.
having a joint committee meeting as far as community development. I know that finance does joint committee meetings with others on a regular, but we thank you and thank you for, joining us and bearing with us. So now, because it's a
Madam Chair.
Yes, Council
Yes,
President,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have a comment, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you. And as I was mentioning earlier, I just hope that we as a city are able to streamline this process so that other businesses don't have to go through what the owners of Three Amigos had to go through. I mean, they had to spend thousands of dollars on trying to get a liquor license, paying lawyer fees, when they really didn't have to. So hopefully we're just able to guide businesses better who might have to go through this process down the road. I'm sure it was a very frustrating process for them. I'm glad that they are still willing to operate and they didn't move out of the city. They're a great group of people who own the Three Amigos, and I'm looking forward to them being a part of a community that so many other restaurants in that area are able to sell alcohol. But I guess at the end of the day, I just want us to be able to streamline this process. So I just think we need some conversation behind the scenes to help businesses not to go through this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I do agree with you. We do have to be a little bit more user-friendly, but since we are the legislators and we are the ones who make the laws, then maybe this is something that we should review on how we can streamline these processes as long as we are complying to state laws. Okay, so at this point, not seeing any comments, any hands from Zoom or the public. Great, let's move this along. Okay, so we have a resolution. We do not have to vote this, but I'm going to repeat how this is going to read. It's a resolution. Excuse me, yes? Oh, an echo, okay. A resolution approving an amendment to the city's comprehensive development plan entitled Wilmington 2028, a comprehensive plan for our city and communities regarding 6 parcels of lands located along Lincoln Street between 10th and 11th Streets to change the future land use category of such parcels from medium-density residential to neighborhood mixed use in relation to the proposed rezoning of such parcels. We are deleting 1008 Lincoln Street, which is property 26-020.30-041. Okay? All right.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, I read that resolution was the approval of resolution 3-23, a proposal to rezone 6 parcels from R3, one-family row house, to C2 secondary business. So if there's another resolution floating around that doesn't say that, I'd like to share that, please.
Well, this is the resolution that's on the agenda.
I think it's a lot of paperwork, and if I may, it is the resolution for the comprehensive plan. So,
Well, a point of order. So the commission says if we're acting on the commission, which the presentation indicated that at least it was influencing us, the planning commission voted to approve the revised resolutions. So to be in somewhat simpatico with that, since we had that presentation, I would think that we would then follow their proposed resolution language. And I may again be wrong, but it'd be the first time. So the way that it's read, after the amendment, is from R3 one-family row house to C2 secondary business.
Is that right?
Is there any clarification, Mr. Goff, that you can give us on this?
You're talking about the same resolutions.
Yes. Well, one's a resolution, the other one's an ordinance.
You just said one title to it. It's the same thing.
See, I'm from the school where language matters.
Yeah.
And as legislators, you know, this falls on us to get right. Not from the audience, but from us. So, I mean, the committee should come to some type of resolution on what we are proposing originating from this body.
What exactly is the issue, Mr. White? Because we changed it, it's not 7, it's 6. It was included in the reading of the title of the resolution.
I did not hear, Madam Chair, 6 parcels from R3, one family row house to C2 secondary business.
Because that's not what's on my agenda. So when I read to move this forward, I read what's on the agenda. I don't have to go through all the little details and letters.
Well, if we went through the presentation, that puts us at this position, and the planning commission's language is this, thus, then what are we doing?
That's a good point.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, proceed.
The third whereas clause in the resolution, it does make a reference to the 7 parcels, in which Chairwoman Cabrera mentioned to change it from 7 parcels to 6 parcels by deleting the parcel number 26-020- excuse me, parcel number 26-020-041 from a zoning classification of R-3, one-family row houses, to a zoning classification of C2, which I believe is what you're also stating, Councilman White.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So is it the same thing, Ms. Bassnight? Is there any further clarification that is needed before the resolution gets moved out of committee? Not hearing any, we move forward. And because it's a resolution, we do not need to vote on this. Okay, moving along. At this point,
we are going to go to ordinance 23-021, an ordinance to amend Chapter 5 of the City Code to extend Sunday hours of operations for non-conforming liquor stores. Councilman Field, you may proceed.
Okay, so this is an ordinance, basically, about 95 to 99% of all the liquor stores in the city of Wilmington are in commercially zoned properties, which means that they are allowed on Sundays to operate from 11 o'clock to 6 o'clock PM. There's a very small number of liquor stores in properties that are zoned non-conforming use, which which means they are zoned in residential districts, but they are approved to operate as commercial entities under special zoning board of adjustment approvals. So they operate as liquor stores, but on Sundays, they are only allowed to operate from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. This ordinance is proposing to allow, I'll read the summary at the end because it's very simple. It amends Chapter 5 of the City Code to extend Sunday hours of operation of non-conforming liquor stores to match the hours of operation of commercially zoned liquor stores in the city. It does nothing more than that. It basically says if you're operating from 12 to 4, now you can operate from 11 to 6 on Sundays, not a minute earlier and not a minute later, and it would not affect any other hours of the week for liquor stores. And I have a couple of residents, constituents who I brought to speak. Should I have them speak for 2 minutes now? Or?
No, we'll wait till we have questions from.
Okay, so
city
I think
council
that
members.
pretty much is straightforward about what this ordinance entails, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields. At this point, Councilmember McCoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Field did make me aware of this and exactly the liquor store that he had in mind, and I'm happy to help. I think my only question was, did we ever figure out what the other 5% was? I think you said it was 95%, so it must only be like maybe 2 or 3 other stores that actually are non-conforming.
I asked license and inspection, and the answer that I got was maybe somewhere between 15 and 20 properties throughout the city. They don't know. I don't know if there's a tally, and maybe somebody from L&I can speak to that. But it also does not mean that a store has to open from 11 to 6 on Sundays. It just means that they can open from 11 to 6 on Sundays.
Question.
Yes.
Yes, if L&I is here, you said it's 15 to 20, I'd like to know from L&I, where are these 15 to 20 liquor stores located? And I'm mentioning this because I had an issue in the 3rd District, and we went from liquor store to liquor store, and that's why we have reduced the hours. And I don't know if, I don't know if I'm okay, even though this is, so we're changing this for one liquor store. I would like to hear L&I tell me with these 15 or 20 liquor stores, because in certain areas it's okay, in certain areas it's called loitering, and other issues are occurring. And that's why the mayor, the administration has brought up some of these liquor stores because of the issues and the problem we had around certain liquor stores. So just to say for one liquor store, it's okay and it's not a problem, and that's not an area that even has any issues. I'd like for Jeff to come up here and tell me Jeff Starkey, if he's in the house. But if Jeff is here, he said he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind.
Okay, Commissioner Boykin is on Zoom. We will have him
I
answer
didn't
the
know.
question.
I'm sorry, I can't see.
And if I can please, I appreciate the participation of all my council members that are here today. This is just the party, but we have to allow for the committee members first to ask their questions. And I had 2 committee members that are members of the committee, and I understand your concerns, Councilmember Oliver, and we will get to them. So at this point, I will allow Councilman Spadola to speak first, and then Councilmember Darby, and then we're going to bring Councilmember Boykin, you on standby to answer any questions that any of the council members have, including the question that Councilmember Oliver will re-ask. Thank you. You may proceed, Councilman Spadola.
Thank you, Councilmember Cabrera. I just wanted to say, years ago when I was the president of the Delaware Avenue Civic Association, before I was on council. There was an issue that came up, or that Paul, I can't remember what it was, but the owner of the liquor store, Paul, reached out, was looking for the Civic Association's support for something, and I did some due diligence and to see if there was support for what he wanted to do. And I was just overwhelmed by how appreciated and respected Paul and his family are by not only from his customers, but also his neighbors. This is for this liquor store specifically. This is a way we can support a minority-owned business and support the community there who really values him as a resident. I believe he lives above the store and is a fan favorite among the locals. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Spadola. Councilmember Darby?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to add my comments to this legislation. I spoke to the sponsor earlier this week because I had some of the same concerns that Councilmember Oliver had presented in regards to my specific district or area in regards to the hours of it being open specifically on Sundays. However, I drove around to all the liquor stores to confirm and spoke to Councilmember Fields. So the three that are on North Market Street in the 2nd District, Creston Liquors, and then the one on 30th Street, specifically in the 2nd District or like adjacent, because that technically, the other 2 liquor stores are in Councilmember Oliver's district. But since it's right across the street, I went. But those liquor stores are already open 11 to 6 on Sundays. So I know specifically, and I just want people to know, the 2nd District, if this passes, won't be impacted by hours open, but I would, if my liquor stores in my district were going to be extending hours on Sunday, I would be concerned because I know a lot of people in my district, one, they don't even want, we have too many liquor stores and they are nuisance to the community when there's 3 in a 2-block radius, right? And all the other issues or problems that come along with that, especially on North Market Street between Councilmember Oliver and I. So I just want to say, like, my district won't be impacted by it specifically because I went out and asked and went to each store, and they're already open on Sundays from 11 to 6. So I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. And now, any other council members from the committee? Anybody online? Fields, Councilmember Fields?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to, the same thing that Councilwoman Darby said goes for me too. I did speak to the sponsor earlier this week. He explained the legislation to me. I live right in the middle of all of my liquor stores, just about, in West Center City, and I did ride up there in the Hilltop as well. As everyone knows, I've already myself along with the administration, we've already bought out 2 liquor stores because of not so much of the hours they were open, but it was more so of the people that were standing in front of them and the crowd that was in front of them. So that was the problem. And from what he says, they don't stay open any longer than 6 o'clock, and the crowd does move after they close. So, like she said, had it extended the hours, that was going to be an issue for me. But it doesn't extend it to what it already is, which is 6 o'clock. So that's why I'm in support of this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields, and I have Councilmember White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too support this legislation. It doesn't do anything more than already extends those hours of operation. But it's interesting to hear this conversation when we talk about supporting businesses, and we've gone through this long diatribe regarding Three Amigos. These other businesses need to be supported also. Nuisance properties, that's a separate conversation. And following the agenda, I would just think that we're not showing a bias to any group. And the word of supporting businesses in the city goes across the board. And we're surely going to test that regarding some other items. But I support the legislation. I too walked and talked to the liquor store owners in my district, somewhat adjacent to the second, and this is a continuation of the same practice. But let's just be cognizant, you know, our extension of an olive branch to businesses need to be a little bit more universal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman White. Before I proceed to Councilmember McCoy, for the council members that are on Zoom, we're getting feedback from somebody's phone, or maybe you have the phone and the computer both on, but it is really disruptive, so I really need whomever's doing it to just try to figure it out, please. Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've actually have a very pretty good understanding about what's going on with the liquor stores in my area. I have one in particular, and I was just trying to find out whether or not this one is a non-conforming, because like I said, I didn't have an issue with what he was actually trying to get done, with Councilman Field is trying to get done for the business owner that he's, you know, that he's familiar with. But I have one store that I really don't want to give them any more leeway than what they have, because it has been a disruption in my neighborhood, and I've been trying to identify and find other ways to get them to calm down in that area. So the address is 119 6 Harrison Street. Is that is that considered a non-conforming store? Non-conforming liquor store? Is Mr. Boykin on?
So at
still
this
on the
time,
line?
Commissioner Boykin, if you could get on and we can have some questions answered. We'll start with the question that Councilmember McCoy asked.
Evening, Madam Chair. Business compliance now falls under the Department of Land Use and Planning under Director Starkey. So if he has the information, I think he's the best person to answer the question for that. And also, non-conforming use also comes under Land Use and Planning now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Starkey, if you may come up, because you know, you are the man. We might have some
State your
public,
name.
we might have some public works questions too.
Jeff Starkey, Land
State
Use
your
and-
name and your 3 hats.
Jeff Starkey, Land Use and Planning. I don't have the information available right now, but I could provide you that information tomorrow. The property that you're talking about is in R3 zoning district, so most likely it's a non-conforming use. So, and I will get you the list of all the liquor stores in the city of Wilmington.
Everybody else know how to act right but them.
Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared to answer that question, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to proceed. Yeah, go ahead. Proceed, Councilmember Oliver.
No, I just wanted to for the record, I definitely, I support this legislation. As Councilman White has stated, we have already talked about this legislation. I just wanted noted on the record because I had issues in the 3rd district with liquor stores. So I wanted noted on the record that I just asked some questions regarding the non-conforming, and I know this is, regarding one liquor store, so I do support businesses. As I stated, I talked to Councilman White and Johnson, and I spoke to the sponsor earlier, but I just want to put it out there that I asked the questions that's necessary regarding the 3rd district, but I do support all businesses. And I do go to that liquor store on Gilpin Avenue, and it's a, very nice block. But like I said, I have issues, the same issues they have over there, they don't have in the 3rd district, so I'm okay with it. I just wanted to put it out there, but I had to still.
Yeah, I'll get you a list tomorrow. I'll put
because,
together a
this
list
is
of-
just a committee meeting, but if you can give Councilman McCoy and myself, just email us the 15 you're talking about. Thank you.
Councilman White also.
So we don't have to keep going on and on about it.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
there is a question that I posed to to Marshall Bass Knight, and maybe Marshall, if you want to speak to this or not, but the response that I got from the law department from Mr. John Stant is that he will email us a list of the non-conforming, and that it could possibly impact some of our problem neighborhoods, but doesn't believe that it would be many, and that it could possibly be between 10 and 12. So there is a list that is being compiled that council members can review. I too want to support this business because as a small business person, I think we all should have that opportunity to thrive. If there are already liquor stores that are getting that courtesy of being open at 11 and closing at 6, there should be no reason why this particular liquor store that is not in a problem neighborhood should not be able to do so. But like my council colleague Oliver and Fields have mentioned, I've lived in Councilmember Fields' district or nearby to know the problem that liquor stores can create. And as stated, the city literally bought 2 of them out because if you can't rid of them, you got to buy them out because of the problems that occur, the shootings, the loitering, the dirt, etc. And I think that in our high-risk neighborhoods, it is certainly something that I would not condone. If anything, I'd like to see less liquor stores around our city and maybe other alternatives like little corner restaurants and things like that. So for now, are there any other comments from our colleagues?
Yes, Madam Chair.
We have 3 people online. We have the president, Councilmember Harley, Fields, and Darby. So we'll start with the president, and then we'll go to the council members on the committee, and then Councilmember Harley. Thank you, Mr. President. Continue.
Thank you. So just for clarity, if this moves forward, this will also allow other liquor stores the ability to stay open later? Not just the single liquor store that Councilmember Field is referring to?
Who would like to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yes, it would.
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
there
and
are
right
some
now,
that
we
are
don't
already
know where
open.
those liquor stores are located?
Well, that's the list, Council President, that we were just speaking of. We
Okay.
have some that are already between, they're open between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. So the precedence is there, correct, Commissioner?
Right, I think the liquor stores that you're only referring to are the non-conforming uses. The one in commercial districts are permitted to open from 11 to 6.
Okay, so yeah, so this
Okay,
would
but
set a
this would
precedence.
allow those that are non-conforming to also extend their hours, but we just don't know where those are right now, right?
Can I answer?
I'm going to let the sponsor speak.
Is that correct?
Mr. President, I'm going to have the sponsor speak to that.
So, yeah, so this would affect any liquor store that is non-conforming use. And you can't apply it to one and say, it's not just something you can apply to one. So it would apply citywide. But again, by extending hours, I just want to clarify, it's Sunday only, going from 12 to 4 to 11 to 6. And just to emphasize how almost all liquor stores are already commercial. 5 minutes ago, Councilwoman McCoy asked about 119 South Harrison Street. I just looked it up on my phone, and as an example, this is already zoned commercial. So that property that's a problem in the fifth district is already commercial, so would not be affected at all by this legislation. And I'm happy to look up any other addresses. It can tell you very quickly if there's something in any other council member's district that's a problem. And would this be affected by this ordinance?
Just for a point of
Thank you.
clarification,
I
we
just
have a
a
list.
follow-up,
Oh, I'm sorry,
please,
excuse me,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Excuse me, Mr. President, Commissioner was going to answer to that, and then we'll have you speak.
No,
Okay.
we have a list of all the non-conforming uses because they have to register them every 2 years. So I can see if that was on a list and provide you with a list of all the non-conforming liquor stores.
Continue, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my dilemma is that if this does move forward, it could affect the neighbors of those liquor stores that we don't know where they are. Fortunately, this particular liquor store, they do very well by their neighbors, and their neighbors love them, and they're a part of the community. But all liquor stores aren't that same model. So that would be my concern. That we're going to open the floodgates without having a conversation with the neighbors, saying that they approve of their liquor store having extended hours. Because it could wreak havoc on some neighborhoods, and we just don't know who they are.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Councilman White?
Madam Chair, thank you for recognition. I believe we're having 2 separate conversations. We have a nuisance law, and maybe the question at some other committee is how come or why not, or how can we strengthen that nuisance law regarding these properties? And I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues, it's a quality of life issue in some communities. but I do believe we passed a nuisance law that would elevate these complaints to the point of some action would be taken. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman White. Councilmember Oliver?
Now, I hear my colleagues' comment, but that's, you just said that's not the case in the 3rd district. So you live over in the 1st district, you don't have the same issues I have in the 3rd district. And when you're talking about these nuisance properties, as you know, Councilman Maria, being at large, you've seen the issues we've had in the 3rd district. So it's a totally different issue. It's like night and day. And we do have a nuisance law, and let's not even get me started on nuisance laws that it's not followed up on. So let's move on, because that's a whole nother conversation.
Councilman Johnson?
I have also talked to the sponsor about this. I think this has brought up very good conversations. Before I can make a final verdict on it, I would like the list of properties. As I understand, there's one in the 6 that may be affected. This is a citywide problem, nuisance properties, especially liquor stores. As we're looking at innovative ways to rebuild our neighborhoods, these liquor stores, especially non-conforming liquor stores, sap a lot of neighborhoods. So, hopefully this list, once we get it, we're able to evaluate it. But I am looking forward to getting that list. So, we can make a final call on this.
Thank you. We have members that are waiting online. Councilmember Fields?
Yes. First of all, I just wanted to clarify this. Please explain to me non-conforming liquor store or whatever the store is. Can somebody give me that definition? And then
Go ahead, Commissioner, please.
Yes, Councilwoman Fields, non-conforming means that particular property doesn't conform to the zoning district that is intended for. For example, R3 zoning district is a single-family homes. Liquor stores that were pre-existing before that zoning district was created are allowed or permitted to remain open, provided they don't close. Once they close and been vacant for a year, that use has to go back to a single-family home. So it has to conform to the zoning district that's specified for that particular area.
Thank you for clarification.
Okay, Madam Chair, may I follow up?
You may proceed.
Hello, may I follow up, Madam Chair?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, so my next question is, even if they're non-conforming, they know that their hours are from 11 to 6, so they close at 6. I mean, is that not the case?
No, they're only allowed to operate currently, if they're non-conforming, they're only allowed to operate 12 to 4 on Sunday. And all commercially zoned properties are allowed to operate 11 to 6. The only thing this ordinance is proposing to do is to say to that very select group, you can operate the same hours on Sunday as everybody else. And does that answer your question?
Okay, so the liquor store on Gilpin Avenue is a non-conforming because it's in a residential area, it's not in the commercial area.
I mean, it has to do with the history of the block, essentially. I mean, what the properties were, what the block was 100 years ago. But if you look around that block, right now it's next to a CVS. There's about to be a very large apartment building. It's essentially, it looks as commercial as many of the other blocks, but it is officially non-conforming.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, thank you,
I
Councilman
have
Fields.
one last statement to say. Just listening to the sponsor, the bottom line is, them folks are drinking like they're drinking in the 3rd district. The 8th district with the 7th district is drinking like the 3rd district nowadays. Kudos to them. I'm good.
Okay. Councilmember Darby?
I think Councilmember Harley was before me, but I don't know.
Well,
if you
you're a
want her to
member of
go
the
or me to
committee,
go.
so I'm sorry. You're a member of the committee. I have
You
given some
can, you
grace,
can
but-
go, Councilwoman Darby. I don't mind waiting.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah, I don't want
Councilmember
no
Harley,
problem,
for your
no problem.
graciousness.
But so my thing was, I know another council person made a comment about not being biased, and I am going to be very frank. I am biased, and I think because liquor stores for me and my community have not been positive. I get a lot of complaints about liquor stores, and I know my district won't be impacted. However, I think the legislation should be held until we have the list and see what neighborhoods are going to be impacted, right? So even though it's not in my district, I still don't want East Side to now have 3 more liquor stores open from 11 to 6 now because they were once non-conforming, now they're conforming, right? So in like these certain neighborhoods, I don't want to see the impact of liquor store hours extending. Literally, I drive down my block in the liquor store on the weekdays that opens up at 9. There's people lined up. I don't know if that happens in the 8th district, but there's literally people lined up with all types of issues waiting for the liquor store to open, like waiting. They stand there all day, right? So like those are things that are happening in certain communities that you're not seeing in yours. So I think it should be held. I think we should wait until we have the list and then come back to this conversation, because I think we're just dancing in circles at this point because we don't even have a list.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. Councilmember Harley? And then Councilmember
Thank you,
Bracy.
Madam Chair. I have to agree with, can you hear me?
Yes, proceed.
Yes, I have to agree with Council Member Darby. I was thinking along the same lines because clearly it doesn't seem to me that there is an awareness of the impact of the stores opening 2 extra hours in other districts as it relates to this 1 or 2 liquor stores that is trying to get the right of way to stay open longer. And I think that when you look at the city, you know, even though we're districts, but when you look at us collectively, I think we should always think about, okay, risk and, you know, the pros and the cons and until we see this list, I don't know. I'm just thinking that, you know, to serve 1 or 2 liquor stores and the impact is negative in other districts and several liquor stores, I think collectively we have to look at that as a council body. And I do understand the spirit of this legislation as a business owner and his desire to want to be open longer based on the times that we're in now versus when he first opened. But I do think that we need to learn more about some of these other liquor stores, because I know 8th and Pine is one that comes to my mind. There's a number of liquor stores in the 4th district on the east side, and I'm not sure how they will be impacted. And I know for sure that they draw a lot of negative foot traffic. So I'm just saying, on one end, it may be great and it's no problem in one district, but in another district, it could be creating more negative activity, even to the point of crime. So I'm in support of wanting to see the list first. That's my comment. That's all I have, Madam Chair. And no, I'm sorry. My second question is this. When residents call the police, or residents calling the police as it relates to liquor stores being nuisance properties, and if that is the case, I think we should even try to find out what liquor stores have our residents been calling about as it relates to this as well. Because if we are saying yes to this and this yes to a liquor store that is already a problem, then that's something we need to look into as well. So that really is all that I have. Thank you. Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Councilmember Bracy?
No comments. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to have my hand up.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Madam Chair, I have another
Yes,
comment. if no one
Councilmember,
else
Council
has
President, thank
their
you.
hand raised.
Council President, proceed.
Thank you. Yes, I just think that it would be very irresponsible for us to move forward. I know that council member, just without having a conversation with the neighbors of the liquor stores that we don't even know about. But I think that we need to move on this as fast as we can. Once we are able to determine where those liquor stores are and are able to have those conversations with the neighbors to make sure that those liquor stores are being good neighbors. I know that Councilmember Darby mentioned to hold. I don't think that she officially did it. I don't want to railroad Councilman Fields his legislation, but I would respectfully ask him to hold it until we can get more information and have conversations with the neighbors that would be affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. At this time, do we have any comments from the public? At this point, do we have anyone here that would like to make a comment? And if you would like to come up and speak, you may. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Nilesh Patel. I own the Gilpin Liquor. Actually, I live above my liquor store with my family and everybody. And especially, like, you know, I fall in the non-conform, the property we was just talking here. And like my hours is 12 to 4. So like I have a lot of customer and everybody, you know, ask me about this, how I can extend my, why not extending my hours and everything. So I just find out, you know, this is the reason. So that's why I just, you know, wanted to tell everybody, like Sunday especially, like a lot of people for the neighborhood, it's convenience for them to come, easy for them to provide the service. And I just wanted to, that's all.
We understand. Thank you. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I see that the family is growing.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And you know, I just want to say, this is a topic that, it's a hard topic because we can't just allow for something to happen in one neighborhood and not allow it to happen across the board. And although that might be a neighborhood where you're not going to see the problems, unfortunately, we do have neighborhoods where, and, you know, again, this has been one of my pet peeves working with these problem properties, and sadly enough, liquor stores happen to be one of them, and it's just too much of what happens around. It really is up to the sponsor how he would like to proceed. Obviously, I feel that we are not working with all the facts here, not having the lists, not having the list of other non-conforming liquor stores in those neighborhoods that are creating a concern. Certainly, we should be working with all the decks. However, I am not one to hold things in committee. If the sponsor wants to proceed, we will take it to a vote. It's either going to be voted out of committee or not. But certainly before it goes on the floor on council, these questions have to be answered before that support would be lent even by myself. So that is, you know, what I have to say to this. I am very concerned that this opens up a can of worms for other neighborhoods to now. Some people pray for those hours for those liquor stores at the time that they close so they can have peace in their neighborhoods. So I understand both sides here, and being a businessman, wanting to grow your business as well as you're growing your family.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Fields?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one thing to say. I wanted to let the owner of the liquor store on Gilpin Street, it has nothing to do with us not wanting to support him in his endeavors to keep his store open. However, that affects other neighborhoods that are in other areas that this could ultimately affect and bring more harm than help. It may help one, but harm many others. So that is why it's important that we take our time that we have and we get that list of other non-conforming stores to find out where they're located, how they're operating, before we decide to really put this on a vote to the floor. So again, it is not to say that you're not a good store owner. It's not to say that we don't understand that you have a growing family and that you need a growing business and that you're a minority. It is basically to say that we as legislators have to look at our districts as well. So that is the 3rd, the 2nd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and possibly the 7th. So I just wanted to put that out there. I just wanted to make it very clear. We have to be cognizant of how we open up this can of worms. I believe that's what Council President said. So that's all I had to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields and Councilman Johnson.
And just briefly, I think as from the business development standpoint, what we try to do on council, as I believe Councilmember White did allude to, we are, our job is to problem solve and figure out how to help our businesses, but how to support our neighborhoods as well. So, as we look at this ordinance, definitely I look forward to that list, and hopefully that will allow us to figure out how to move forward.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Any other comments? Anyone from the public speaking? If not, I will turn it over to the sponsor.
I'm a little bit surprised by some of these comments because I spoke to everybody on this committee, and there were several people that said they were voting yes for it and didn't bring these points up until now. So it's, again, this is an ordinance that simply goes from 12 to 4 to 11 to 6. It's not Saturday night at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock. It's not Friday night at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. It's a very small ordinance, and I wish these concerns had been expressed in the private conversations that I had with almost everybody in this room, where I was told that the vote would be yes. So I'm going to hold it because I'm not sure exactly which way the vote will go, and we will get the list of the 15 properties that are non-conforming. And I texted certain people, asked to chat. If you have certain properties that you have concerns about, please send them to me. It took me 30 seconds to look up the one property, 119 South Harrison Street, and confirm that it's not non-conforming, it's commercial. And I'm happy to do that with any other properties in any other district. So I will be holding this, and we'll bring it up at the next committee meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Field, and I think that with having all the information in front of us, many of the council members who expressed concerns here today can make, as they say, an educated decision. All right, we're going to proceed with an ordinance to amend Chapter 42 of the Wilmington City Code to permit residents in certain residential properties to use, install, and maintain curbside charging cords and electric vehicle charging stations in the public right-of-way. The sponsor is Councilman Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity. This is a long time coming. It's actually, in fact, been over a year of planning, meeting with Public Works Department and administration on this, and really putting a sustainable Wilmington action plan together. Bottom line is that we're swiftly moving to facing climate change. As we've seen, there's weather around here. Look today, we have a tornado warning. So we have a lot going on, and we need to step up in Wilmington. I've gotten many requests from my district in terms of wanting to install the adapters, the charging stations, and unfortunately I had to tell neighbors, sorry, you can't do that because we don't have, it's not in our code to figure out a way you can install adapters. This is a first step, and actually we were already planning this, but the fire was lit under City Council as there was a state law passed, which is Substitute 1 Senate Bill 187, championed by Senator Sam McBride. That was passed last year and requiring us to pass it by July 1st. 2023. So we're right at the deadline, but through use of a consultant and administration, we were able to come up with this plan. Again, it's not perfect. A working group will need to be formed to figure out other ways we can add charging stations to our park and public places. So we're going to need to do a lot more work in Wilmington, frankly, to step up, but this really isn't in line, I think, with moving us forward as a really forward-thinking, tech-savvy city. So I appreciate it, and I believe we have someone from the administration, Mr. Rago, here to speak, and I believe Commissioner Kelly Williams is here as well.
John Rago, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, before Mr. Rago speaks, there were some concerns that we did receive phone calls in reference to some of the language in terms of what's criminal, what's civil. There was confusion as to if you already own a charger and have a charging station, that you now have to get a retractable charger. So as you go to explain this, I just wanted to mention some of the concerns that were mentioned, and that maybe this legislation may not be in perfect form and might have to do a little bit more work, but we understand the compliance and getting it out of committee and knowing that there will be future amendments is what we said to our constituents. But please proceed to explain this. I'm going to turn the committee over to my vice chair, Nathan Field, while I use the ladies' room. Thank you.
Okay. John Rago, Deputy Chief of Staff, and your both of the chair comments are absolutely appropriate. So I won't dwell on much of what you said, but I think it is important for the public to understand that the city of Wilmington is taking this step because we do want to be in compliance with a state law that takes effect July 1. And kudos to Senator Sarah McBride, as you mentioned, for nudging not only us, but other cities, over 30,000 in population, to move forward on electric vehicle charging stations. What we're asking tonight is that the legislation be released from this committee and then taken to a council vote on July 6th. We'll be a few days late in terms of being in compliance with July 1, but at least we'll have something on the books. And then that's where the real work begins, because the other comment that I wanted to make tonight is we're perfectly happy with creating, as Councilmember Cabrera mentioned, a working group. We know there are concerns. I spent some time earlier this afternoon reading Councilmember Nathan Field's concerns, and it's all perfect for a working group to sit together, try to work this out. We know that EV technology is still developing. We know that the interest in electric vehicles is still developing. And we also know that our city, state, and the nation is its commitment to electric vehicles. It's sort of still developing also. So Wilmington supports the future, as Councilmember Johnson alluded to. And the future includes electric vehicles. This is just an initial effort to get an electric vehicle charging station process in place per the state requirement. The legislation that you have before you and considering tonight is not effective until January. So we have time. If you can adopt it, get it on the books, we can then make changes, and together we can work on those changes. And if we make any changes, we will certainly bring those back to council, anything that has to be codified. We did a contract with a firm called Energetics, and we did that many months ago because we were still learning about this technology. And, you know, not many cities have mastered anything really about the technology. It's tough. Philadelphia, they started out on one track, thought it was a good idea at one point to let residents reserve spaces out in front of their homes, and then they realized that a densely packed city like Philadelphia and like Wilmington, it just doesn't work. But that doesn't mean we need to stop. Doesn't mean we need to stop looking for solutions to the different concerns that have been raised. So we are happy to, again, we'll share that Energetics report with you. We think it's important you see what we've seen so far. So very briefly, this legislation just does a few things. I won't go into all the details. Option one, the city would permit a level 1 electric cord, think extension cord, to run from the EV owners, the electric vehicle owners, a property to their vehicle. Now they would have to cover it. The property owner or property renter, the occupant is the way it's listed in the legislation, would have to cover that cord. You can't purchase cord covers because we're trying to prevent any kind of tripping hazard or anything that impedes the use by pedestrians of sidewalks. Option two, the city would permit the EV owner to install a permanent charging station in front of their property in the public right-of-way so their vehicle could be charged. Now, the kicker here is neither of these options allow the EV owner to reserve a space in front of their property. It would be essentially hit or miss as far as securing a space in front of their home. But each of you knows in your district, and the city as a whole for the at-large members, that allowing EV owners to reserve a parking space is just not practical. Now, that's not to say we can't get to something that is more practical, but that again calls for the need for this working group. So, please, if you can, allow this committee, or allow the piece of legislation out of committee, approve it on July 6th so we can stay close to that July 1st state deadline, and then we'll form a working group of the administration and council and try to resolve any differences that remain and have something solid in place as we move toward January 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Rago, and we definitely want that working group to consist of EV owners and any other interested parties or people in the neighborhood that might have some concerns. I, for one, as an environmentalist, I truly understand the importance of moving away from oil and getting into renewable energy.
Yeah.
So I'm very much in support of electric vehicles, even if I did not get a clear learning lesson on how to drive the Tesla that I ended up getting into an accident in. But we'll save that story for another day. But certainly it was interesting, and it was an experience. Finding a charging station was a challenge. And I will say that as we're looking into, by the end of this decade, 70% of Americans are going to own an electric vehicle. How we as a city are going to conform, whether we have charging stations in neighborhoods where people can park, leave their car overnight.
Right.
I understood, my learning lesson from listening to my constituents is that unlike a supercharger that you can charge in 15 minutes and get 50% charge, that will ruin your battery if you do
Right.
that continuously. So you really need to have a lower level charger.
And a slower charge is better for electric vehicle.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a slower charge.
Right.
So obviously that means you want to be able to park it overnight. Now, the good news is that you do get 300 miles on a full charge for some of these vehicles, so that means you don't have to charge as
Right.
often. So I hope that we do find some consensus where we can look to the future, also meet the current needs, so that working group is going to be essential. I, for one, will support this, moving it out. I understand we need to be
Right.
compliant, but we certainly have to eliminate some things and maybe look at having a better product.
Right.
And the sponsor may want to, say what amendments if he wants to make any tonight. And Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Yes, please, you may proceed.
I just, support what John was saying, and let's not let perfect get in the way of progress, right? So, as we all know, parking is a very challenging situation for us in the city, and it's really hard to come up with a equitable solution that is flexible enough for us to move with the changing technology. That's a really difficult thing for us as a government, right? To come up with like guidelines for us to continue to address technology and really meet the needs of all of our different diverse constituents, right? So at least that's what I find in Public Works, right? We have constituents with needs such as handicap parking and regular constituent needs, and it's just a very difficult process to try to make everybody happy. So but we need to move forward, and that's why we're here today, and we've got to start somewhere, and this is the place where we start. And I'm looking forward to finding that sort of sweet spot with everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this point, do we have any questions from the Community Development and Urban Planning Committee members that are here present? If not, I will move on to online. Councilmember White.
Yes, I would like to get it in the way of perfect rather than this particular piece of legislation, Commissioner Williams, because as written, even if it's only a blueprint for moving forward, it's problematic. And I think anybody who reads any piece of this legislation looks at the problematicness of passing this. I mean, this city has an issue, and this is not about not supporting technology. We have an issue just with cones, people reserving their space via cones. And this legislation, the way that I read it, is going to give somebody, it's directing people to have a spot in front of their house. And if somebody thinks that's first come, first serve, you're mistaken. And just to even have this as a blueprint, I mean, I've gone through this piece of legislation repeatedly, and it's just problematic on so part. So while I appreciate the administration's desire to get something done, I think this legislation is not the way to go. And you know, I look forward to some conversations prior to it coming up to a vote. But I wouldn't be supporting it at all.
Madam Chair, or may I just?
Yeah, you may proceed, Mr. Rego.
I just want to be clear, I wasn't sure if the council member, did you say you read it as people can reserve a spot in front of?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
No, that's why I said I didn't read it that.
Yeah,
But
okay.
where we got people parking on the sidewalks already, we got people reserving.
Sure.
I just think it's not even going down a slippery slope. It's going
Right.
down an obvious issue, in my opinion.
And if I may, we're kind of looking at it from a different light, and that is, this is progress. It's not perfect, we said that, but it is progress. We are moving forward on making sure that Wilmington can respond to electric vehicle owners. And so consequently, we have some time here. This does not take effect, even if you were to vote on it, you're not voting on anything effective until January 1st. So that can be changed. We will bring back any issues. We've heard some of the issues already raised, and we'll bring back any changes to the legislation back to council, making sure council is satisfied, and hopefully we've got something that can work.
Madam Chair, just a follow-up.
You may proceed.
Respectfully, Mr. Rego and the administration, I'm new to council. I'm 14 weeks on. And it's my understanding that, one, this legislation is populations 30,000 and over, which only affects the city of Wilmington.
No.
No?
It affects city, as I understand it, affects city of Newark, and there's one more, Dover.
Okay, I had Dover at 24,000, so
Yeah.
my math is wrong.
Yeah.
So now you guys made me lose my train of thought.
Well, that's all right. You said you're new to council.
Oh,
And
thank
we
you,
and we
thank
want to be
you. I'm
gentle.
new to council. Thank you. Thanks for helping out here.
We want to be gentle with you because you're new to council.
Thank you. So
He's awfully quiet for being new, isn't he?
I'm new to council. This legislation has been in somebody's desk drawer?
No.
No?
No.
Because it's the first time I'm seeing it.
No, I know, but I'll speak to that. If you put it on us in terms of the late arrival of this piece of legislation. This, if I could go back with you, the council chair made a reference to including citizens or EV owners in what we may do moving forward. I have to consult with the chief of staff here, but I think people should understand it's not always easy. Government people, we've been around for a while. We're trained in public policy or trying to sift through issues, but this is a very difficult issue.
Yes.
We brought a company on board that tried to help other cities, but we found out that they didn't necessarily help other cities a lot because this technology is still developing. So all we're trying to do is what we think is the wisest move right now, get something in place, be in compliance with what the state asks us to do, and then we have plenty of time to work together. As I say, I reviewed Council Member Nathan Fields' concerns. I understand he has enforcement concerns. How are we going to enforce this and so on? You're absolutely right. They're great topics for a working group. But let me give you the alternative. What's the alternative? We do nothing.
Or the alternative, I hear you, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
All right.
So if the administration is going to move in that direction to have a working group.
Yeah.
And to rely on that working group for changes, would that not be a part of a resolution attached to this? Because I feel more comfortable in terms of language that would codify exactly to get all parties involved,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
I would imagine if you want to, if you would like to amend to include language that includes the creation of a working group to take a look at concerns, once it is passage and we get it on the books by council, we'd be happy with that.
Well, I'll talk to my other colleagues, but no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have to go to Councilmember Darby, Councilmember Field Darby, and then Councilmember Oliver.
So I just have several comments that I want to read. So I would say that you form a working group and then use the working group to write an ordinance.
I know.
Seems like what you're saying is pass the ordinance and then let's form a working group.
I am.
I don't understand why it was pushed on us last minute. I mean, we have a Public Works Committee meeting every month. And for the last 2 years, this has not come up at all.
May I address that?
Can I finish my point?
Sure.
So, I mean, and then just last week, suddenly we were told we have to pass this through the Finance Committee, never any discussion of EV. Just, you have to do it, and then we'll form a working group. So that's a problem for me. It's not a framework, it's a highly detailed piece of legislation. So to say, this is just a framework and we can change things, that's just not good practice. It is a highly detailed piece of legislation. And it's filled with issues. And just a couple, I mean, enforcement. I read your press release, and you wrote a well-written press release, and it's introducing significant new bureaucracy and quite a few new rules. And for it to work, all the rules have to be followed, and all the bureaucracy has to work. L&I has problems enforcing the existing laws on the book. And now you're saying, just dramatically increasing the number of rules. One of the points is that L&I does not enforce the parking stuff after 5 o'clock. That is when most of these issues, flashpoints, would come into play. There's nobody checking the parking after 5 o'clock. So are they going to hire new people? What are they going to do there? The historic conservation issues. The neighborhoods where this is really going to come into play the most are places like 40 Acres, Quaker Hill, very old neighborhoods, historic conservation neighborhoods. What is the process for going through the DRPC? How does that? There's just a ton of work that this introduces, and it just doesn't seem to me good practice to just pass it and then fix it later on, when what you should have done was formed the working group, consulted city council, and said, then let's come up with an ordinance, rather than just dump it on us and say, pass it and deal with your constituents after.
Madam Chair, or may I respond? Yes, you may respond. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. But I'm going to have to challenge you on one thing.
Okay.
We can do what we need to do. This city is a strong city. It can do what it needs to do. If you pass this piece of legislation, you know as well as we do, it's not set in stone. It can be changed. And again, I think instead of going through all of this in this particular committee meeting, why not sit together in a working group, work together, and let's get this done? Yes, we have a July 1st deadline. Were we too close to the July 1st deadline? Yes, and for that we apologize. But we have now brought it to council. We would like to work with council, and let's do it. Let's get it done. We can get it done for the citizens and for the residents of the city.
Thank you. Councilmember Darby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I am in support of progress and EV chargers, and I have been speaking to a few of my council people about the many concerns that I have. I printed it out today and read it line by line, and there are so many issues or problems. And one of the same things I have as Councilmember Fields, whichever one. But in regards to the lack of communication with council and this being thrown at us at the last minute. And I also don't believe in loose promises. Promising us that a work group may happen, promising that we can sit at the table with you guys with the track record that you guys have. So I am not comfortable supporting it in the form that it is in. Now, do I think we need, the working group should either come first or come at the same time that this is being passed? But then to say after this, we're going to have a work group and keep promising with the track record you have, I don't feel comfortable supporting this unless a work group happens first, then we do legislation, or that this legislation, this ordinance, has an amendment to it that adds language about a work group being established and what that looks like. So I won't be in support of this, not because of I don't believe in EV. If anybody else on this council, I believe in progress, moving forward, going forward with technology, and really just being a city council that's really taking on new things, right? So a lot of my conversations are about that, but I'm also for doing things equitably and doing it right. And this was not right in any way, shape, or form. There's lack of community input. There's just a notice. So if someone wants to have a EV charger or an EV cord, all they have to do is give a notice to everybody. They don't, like, for me to have a block party on my block, I have to literally knock on people's doors, talk to them, and get them to sign a paper. But to get a cord in front of your house, and even though it's not reserved in a sense like in the legislation, we know how parking works in the city. People fight in my neighborhood because of cones. They're going to be fighting now over these EV cord things. And so I just think that a lot of conversations have not been had with us. And I don't feel comfortable saying yes to something that's been dropped on my lap a few days ago. And it doesn't make sense for the community that I live in. So I'm not in support of it unless there's an amendment tonight for a working group language to be added, or we pause this, do a working group, and then by January or in the next few months, we have something. Yeah, so that's my comments. I'm not in support of this.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. And now Councilmember Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Spadola, we'll get to you next.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with everybody saying. I think it's totally unfair that, City Council, dropped in our lap. But I was able to talk to Senator Sarah McBride today, and I met with Kendra. So it's 5 other bills down in Dover that I have in front of me relating to the EV, this legislation. You have Representative Spadola, you got Rep. Longhurst, you got Stephanie Bowden, Poor. I mean, the list goes on, Townsend. So this is not the end of all, because we are mandated, and, we could go on with that. We are mandated, to have something on the record. Sometimes, being a legislator is not easy. And I totally agree with everybody. I could go on and on. I've been, talking to people all day on the telephone. I'm not even going to reiterate. We know about, the planning department. We know about L&I. We know about the staff. I mean, I feel as though Mara should be here. I can go on and on. I mean, I have a whole book here of the questions, but I do agree with Senator McBride. She stated, Xanthi, if y'all can just at least get this through and we could do a working group. It's so many pieces of legislation before Dover is over end of June. All of this, some of your questions be answered, some of them won't, but this is not in effect, and you can see it on the legislation. It's not in effect until 2024, and I've asked Johnson and spoke with Maria if they can make amendment for the ordinance to be 2025. It's so many questions here. I totally agree. In my community, nobody's buying these cars no time soon. We can barely afford some of the cars we have. So it's something that Dover is requesting, the state is requesting. I'm not going to, turn my nose up to the state. They are legislators and they have a harder job than what we have. So I'm not on the committee, but I would support this piece of legislation. So we are mandated to just catch up with times. I mean, we should be talking about hybrid cars opposed to these cars anyway, these EVs, whatever they are. But more to the story. I can go on and on, but I'm not going to go on and on. I think it's piece of legislation that needs a whole bunch of work. I mean, like I said, I even went over to the mayor's office and with Jim Baker and spoke with the mayor today with Chief of Staff Tanny Washington, along with Jeff Starkey. And like I said, I have a book of questions, but it's going to be a time that we can sit down with the group and ask some of these questions and iron it out. Not that anybody matters, but, not that anybody cares, but it is a tornado watch out tonight. And I just
Thank
wanted to
you.
put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Councilman Spadola, please. He's next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's hard for me to reconcile Mr. Rago's words with the action and his press release with the actual legislation. And I emailed last week specifically about the word starting point being used, because to me, a starting point is basically, bare bones infrastructure, and with future policies to be determined by such and such department. None of this legislation is not a starting point; it's an end point. So it's beyond disrespectful, I think, for the administration, for Mr. Rago specifically, to put this legislation in front of us and basically say, we know it's really bad, we know there's countless problems, but we just need you to pass it and then we can fix it. That's not respectful of a legislative body or the legislative process. I mean, this legislation is so detailed that it even mentions that the curbside charging cord, it must be stored out of sight of the public right of way, along with its covering equipment when the cord is not in use, when is not actively charging a vehicle, except that if a charge has started but is not completed by 11 p.m., then the cord may remain until no later than 8 a.m. Again, this legislation is not a starting point, it is an end point. And like Councilmember Field said, the working group comes first. And lastly, the next council meeting is July 6th, so we're already not going to meet the July 1st deadline. So it's much better off that we actually start with a working group. We actually start with some bare bones legislation and work up from there. Because once we pass this, no one's going to know that we intend to amend it unless they're, city council political fanatics, which there might be 10 of those people in the city. But they will look at this legislation that is supposed to go into effect January 2024, and they're going to think, no way am I buying an EV in the city, because this is the most anti-EV legislation you could be, because it's so burdensome and punitive. So I think, while the state is pushing EVs full throttle, for the city to push this anti-EV legislation, it's very counterintuitive. So I think we need to go back to scratch. We're already missing the deadline as it is. And let's just get this right once and for all. I mean, to pass legislation knowing it's bad with plans to fix it later, I mean, that's not what a functioning legislative body does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Spadola. I will allow Mr. Rago to speak to that.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment to Councilmember Spadola, because he mentioned my words specifically. I want you to understand the administration respects this council. Our timing may have been a little off on this particular one in terms of bringing you a piece of legislation. But again, I'll repeat my statement. I think we all need to be on the side of what the future holds, and the future holds electric vehicles, and we have to figure out how to deal with this. You can say all you want that we do not also normally ignore state mandates. So we're trying to get us on the side of the state mandate by July 1, and Councilmember Spadola knows, as do other council members. If it's in form in legislation and approved by you, it can be changed, and we will change it in a working group. And we're open to the legislation being amended to include the fact that there will be a working group that will proceed from this point forward. So we let's be on the side of, I think, where we need to be, which is the future.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman
That
Spadola.
is gaslighting 101. To equate potentially not supporting this legislation to not being on the side of the future is just gaslighting. There's nothing consistent about that. And again, I view this, one of the few people who charges an EV in the city said he may as well go back to having a gas guzzler after reading this legislation. So if we're really focused on the future, we need to focus on actually having good legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. We understand the frustration that we're all feeling because we felt we needed a little bit more time to have this, but I also understand the urgency and the concern. Two amendments that I would like to discuss and put out there is one, that the implementation would not be till July 1st of 2024. That gives us a whole year. And number two, that we would have a working group that would work on this, and that together we could form a more perfect legislation, but still to get it out of committee and out of council, hopefully, so that we can be compliant.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Rego?
Madam Chair, you said January of 2024.
No,
It-
July 1st of
January. It is
2024.
currently January of 2024. So it would give us,
No,
She said July.
July 1st.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
July 1st of 2024,
I'm-
a year from
Yeah.
next week.
Nice.
Following week.
And I believe, I'm sorry, I believe that's a good compromise. I mean, it's our
That is.
intention to work with city council and to create this working group so we can make some progress on this issue. So we would definitely entertain having an amendment added to this ordinance.
I think that the residents we spoke with, which Councilman Fields, Spadola, myself, and Johnson, I think they feel that they trust us and they're appeased that we will have their input. And we can all agree, the reason this came out the way it is, like you said, you got a consultant, they put it together. It wasn't really done by the Wilmington, the people that touch and feel, and it just came out like a cookie cutter form. And I understand. I'm understanding and seeing both sides of this. I don't like to be in this position myself, but those are the amendments that I would like to put forward, and then we can,
What about public comment?
we'll do that. So that, I'm glad that you agree that that would be a good compromise. At this point, I would like to have public comment, and
Madam
of
Chair,
course.
may I have a comment
Oh,
before we go to public comment?
All right, Councilman White?
The passing or even the promoting of this legislation as written is problematic. And as I look at this, and again, this is what the path you want to go, you mentioned residential properties, which would be K, as a lot or parcel in the city fronting a public right-of-way upon which structure laid out as a single-family dwelling is located regardless of whether it is detached, semi-detached, row house, or townhouse that is currently being lawfully used as a single-family residence. That's the legislation. So my immediate, given my history of housing and supporting fair housing, it dimensions anything about multifamily.
Yes. May I, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
All right, so what we're doing is, my colleague Stephanie Mergler is here, and we're tracking grants that are available. And in this mix, in this working group, if we can come up, there are some grants that are available that would help multifamily facilities, multifamily complexes in setting up charging stations. So we've already begun to look at that, but we don't have it, we don't have anything to put in the legislation right now.
But it's discriminatory as it's written.
May I comment on that?
Yes, you may.
Madam Chair? I understand your concern, but let's keep in mind, the effective date will not be until July 2024. So whatever your concerns are regarding this legislation, and I'm sure you said that there's a lot of holes, in your opinion, we can address that by way of this working group, because it won't become effective until July, which gives you more than enough time to amend any language.
Well, again, I'm going to be with my colleagues and say that the proof is in the pudding. It's the actions in the details.
Yeah.
And I would have to see specific language regarding the promotion of any working group and their effect thereof on this legislation. And that's, that's a long reach for me, just as this is written. I agree with my colleagues. It's just, this is an after-the-fact piece of legislation. It does not allow, and to dismantle it, and I'm going to ask you this, because let's go on public record. The administration, if the administration is saying that with council input and that of the community, that this legislation could be dismantled to the point that would make it really useful for the community and EV units, that would be okay.
Well, see, that's a subjective question
I
now.
know.
You say dismantle.
Well,
What is really dismantle?
we're not,
So we're
I'm
trying
not
to
going to do
go-
committee work, but there are so many issues with this that from what Councilman Spadola said regarding who's going to enforce this after 5 o'clock with the issue of should not be a tripping hazard to the public. Who's making that definition? And again, you know, for those of us who live in the city and govern in the city, it's a cluster waiting to happen, the way this language is written. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
At this point, I'm going to listen to Councilmember Bracy. We're going to take this to a vote. We're going to listen to public comment. We're going to introduce floor amendments on city council to reflect the things that have been discussed in this meeting. That's the best that we can do. Councilmember Bracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one quick, I guess, question/comment. So acknowledging the fact that we are already going to be past the July 1 deadline that the state is imposing, what are the ramifications of us missing that deadline? Because if we already know we're going to miss the deadline, and if there aren't any major ramifications, would it not be more prudent for us, instead of rushing legislation, to send a resolution, a letter, call our state senators, send something down to Lake Hall explaining that we need more time or requesting more time respectively from the state? I understand us not being in compliance, but if there's no immediate action that's going to be taken by the state because we are still working on it, then wouldn't it make more sense for us to send a resolution down to the General Assembly before they're out on June 30th, or send a letter or talk to Senator McBride and the Wilmington delegation to see if there's anything we can do? So that's just my question. I don't want to belabor the point, Madam Chair, but, you know, if we're already going to miss the deadline, you know, is there not a way to extend it so that we can get this right the first time?
Thank you for your comments. I'm sure that missing a deadline by a few days versus a year is a big difference, but Mr. Rego, please answer.
Yeah, to Councilmember Bracy's point, I want to go back to Senator McBride and others who supported this legislation in Dover. I want to go back to what they were doing. They were saying to cities in Delaware, they were saying, it's time now to move forward and understand this technology and make it available for the residents in your cities. So that's what we understand. That was the point. The point was to drive us, to get us to do something. And now, you know, as a city, we were already looking at electric vehicles, and we were trying to study the entire issue. But again, it's always best to stay in compliance with state requirements or state law, and then do what we need to do locally. And I just can't get it out of my head, the fact that there's a notion that once something is adopted, it cannot be changed. It's not being dismantled totally, and we won't know. There's a phrase: "Is it soup yet?" And that's when you kind of know when something's good. It's something that's good for the residents of the city. Is it soup yet? Well, let's get together and figure out how to put the soup together and move forward with this technology.
I'm sorry, if I may
Proceed.
expand on
Chief
that a
of
little
Staff.
bit. To Councilmember Bracy's point about what could be the impact of not passing at this time, we don't know what could happen downstate. They could further add language that would really impede us from structuring our own legislation that fits the city of Wilmington. So that's the danger in it, is that once they pass something, we have to abide by it. That's it.
Right. We're at least acting in good faith.
May I say,
Go ahead, Councilmember Oliver.
my question is, far as some of the individuals that would be on the committee, would they be some of the individuals on the working group? Would it be someone such as Councilman White that's on the committee?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
I'm
It
sure
seems
that
like,
we can make.
Councilmember White is really
Yeah, we can make
passionate about it.
suggestions, and members of council that want to be on it. I think there'll be members of the public that would be interested in being in it. But what I just want to say, you know, the peril, right now, we are before Dover asking for money for our city so that we can stabilize our finances, be able to introduce legislation like the parking legislation, so we can drop tickets to $25. So I definitely do not want to be in a place where we're non-compliant with state law. So we already know we're not going to beat this. This is a very long agenda, and there are still so many more items and people that are here to speak to them.
Yeah.
So we really got to move this along. We're going to have to take this to a vote. We've heard you. We've understand the concerns. We know that it was brought to us late. We know that it's imperfect. I certainly am not in support of the language in this legislation. I've heard what my constituents had to say. I am going to support the amendments that we put on the floor to make it a little bit more digestible, even though that soup is not ready at all. We're in the broth part of it. So we're going to need to move this along. We have one more council member that wants to make a comment, and that would be Councilmember Darby. She's online. And Councilmember McCoy, if you have your hand raised, then you will be next. Councilmember Darby, you may proceed.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna put my hand down. I don't need a
Okay,
comment.
put your hands down, girl, before I slap it down. Okay, thank you. Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you. So I just wanted to find out whether or not the amendment actually was going to take place, where we would place the working group actually on this piece of legislation, and then also changing it to July 2024.
We're open to both of those
Yes.
things happening.
All right, and that will happen. Are you going to be giving us an amendment on the floor, or that going to happen?
On the floor, Councilmember McCoy.
Yes.
You can, if you want to do it now, the city solicitor has come up with some language.
We could do it right now if you wanted to.
Okay.
Give you the
Alright.
language for an amendment, if you'd like.
It's
If
short.
it would make you comfortable.
As long as I read it correctly, so Councilman White doesn't call me out.
Well, I wrote it down, although my handwriting's so awful, I don't know if you can actually read it.
Sure.
So I think the amendment would consist of adding a new section. This section 1 is the ordinance itself. Section 2 is right now, it states the ordinance shall be effective on January 1st. What would happen is you would add a new section 2, saying section 2, a working group comprised of members selected by council and the administration shall be formed to study and recommend changes and adjustments to this ordinance. The second change would be, instead of section 2, the current section 2 reading section 2, it would say section 3, and it would say, this ordinance shall be effective on July 1st, 2024. So that's my suggested language, but you can change it any way you want. And I can bring it up to you, Madam Chair Lady, if you would like me to do so.
I believe that I wrote pretty quickly. So just repeat what you said. Working group of members selected by council and
The administration shall be formed to study this ordinance and recommend changes and adjustments before the effective date. Period. But again, I just wrote that on the fly, so if you don't.
No, that sounds good to me. And again, we still can also make any changes on the floor before we vote on this in the council meeting.
By the way, as the author of this legislation, I welcome you to ask me any questions that you have about it, either now or a later date.
Thank you. And Councilman Field, did you have some last words to
I mean,
say?
So it sounds like the only thing this amendment is suggesting is that we're going to, get it out of committee and then vote for this ordinance as is on July 6th or July 13th. And then, we'll fix it, and then it won't be implemented until July 2024. I mean, you're still asking us to vote into final form the ordinance on July 6th. Whereas I would say a better thing would be just hold it tonight, and then we form this working group, and we, meet this week or next week, we fix it, we put forward a really good thing, and then you get it passed in, August. Because you're still asking us to vote forward into final form.
Yes.
Something that we had no input on, and, frankly, it was the administration that caused the delays.
Yes.
Not us. So it's not, what you're asking us to vote for something really bad and incomplete because of your delays. And the only thing this amendment is doing is I'm not even really sure what it's doing.
Well, what it's doing, my main answer is, it's making us compliant with the state law that was passed. That is what that's what this is doing. And what the amendment is doing is showing good faith that we're going to have a working group, that it's going to take a year before we actually implement this. And at that time, we still on council can make changes as needed. Councilmember McCoy, you had your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to make a statement. Some of my colleagues may remember, some may not, but we actually went through something similar to this last term, and I think it had something to do with data collection and nodes and things of that nature, where we had to try to put something together, and we didn't have all of the information in hand, so we delayed it and tried to get more understanding, and that delay caused us to lose money and things of that nature. So the only reason I'm like, and now do understand that I definitely have been gaslighted at times with council when it comes, with administration about thinking something's going to happen and it doesn't. But I do understand the importance of trying to get something done at like when it's like the time is valuable at that moment. So that's the only reason why I'm, actually going to support this, because it will give us then time a whole year. That was, like I stated, that was the only reason why I'm supporting this. I said, because we don't want to miss out on an opportunity to make certain we have our own language for this new equipment.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you so much. At this point, we do have to allow members of the public to make comment. We have people that came here that have been waiting for many, many minutes. Come forth. Please state your name.
Joe Zolkowski.
Please, you can either stand and speak at the mic, or you can sit next to John and pull his beard for
Joe.
all of these
Come on
problems
over,
that we
Joe.
have tonight.
So, my name's Joe Zolkowski. I'm a constituent, and I have been plugging in my car since 2019.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
do
that.
have experience with plugging it in on the street, and I just wanted to go over some of this stuff, some major concerns I have with the bill. The problem is, if a bill like this passes right away and people start reading it, they'll never buy an electric vehicle. There's too many, there's fees, there's too many plans, permitting, the penalty, and then there's so many things that you have to do to be in compliance, including there's a manual that they don't tell you what's written in the manual. So I'm out of compliance for at least 2 of the items, which means I can now get fined $100 a day until whatever items I'm out of compliance. So if perhaps I go on vacation and I leave it in sight, and I get back from a 7-day vacation, I owe $700. So like how this bill is written, people are gonna see it, it could sit on the books for 6 months while the working group works, and people aren't gonna be, they're gonna be afraid to buy an electric vehicle, and then when we finally get it right, they're not gonna know the new legislation passed. And so the fact is, this is going to deter the purchase of electric vehicles. And yes, there's a July 1 deadline that we're gonna miss, but also legislature leaves on June 30th, and they don't come back until January. So as long as we've got like a 6-month window to figure things out before the state is really gonna come down on anything. So I do think a working group's the way to go. I would love to be on it. I've been doing it now for four years, and there's only about 4 of us, so to promote the future would be great. I'm just scared that this is gonna scare people out of purchasing an electric car.
Thank you. Could you tell us what neighborhood you live in?
Yeah, I live in 40 acres.
40 acres,
Yeah.
okay.
And also, for just a level 1 charger, just so you understand, it would take days to charge a car. So like you need to be able to have a level 2 charger in front of your home too, not hours, but days. And a level 2 charger is just your clothes dryer. That's all it is. It's not really anything fancy. It's the same plug your clothes dryer uses.
Thank you. We're getting educated each day by our EV drivers, and I understand your concerns. I personally think that people really don't read or pay as much attention as they should, but I do take your concerns into consideration. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else from the public, either here presently that wants to speak? And if not, if we have anyone online? No one online? Okay. Excuse me. Yes.
Just for a point of clarity, with the potential floor amendment pertaining to the working group, I didn't know whether or not you want to have a certain amount of members, meaning are we talking about all 13 members of council? So I'm not sure, I just didn't know whether you wanted to look into that more or not, or to specify.
I think that we don't need to be so specific. We need to just say that we are going to have a working group, and those members can be selected by council and the administration, which means that the administration can appoint people from their side, the president can appoint people from this side, or members that are interested in this subject would serve, and then we would invite constituents to participate. And certainly these meetings could be public. People can come in and give public input like anything else that we do. It's not going to be done behind closed
Yeah,
doors.
I just want to share that, I mean, the way it's written, it doesn't state that.
Doesn't
I mean,
say
it
it.
doesn't
Right.
state who's doing the appointments, and it doesn't state a number, so.
That's what
It's
Madam-
open and-
Well, it
Madam
says
Chair.
it's selected by council and the administration.
It's
She's great.
13 members of council. Did you want to have a number? I mean.
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm not,
Go ahead, Councilmember, I'll take your input.
I appreciate it. My input would be, it should be some of the members that's on the committee, as well as the gentleman who just spoke from the public. Just a suggestion.
Follow-up, Madam Chair.
Proceed.
The vagueness continues. The floor amendment doesn't give a start date, doesn't give an end date. Doesn't give let me finish, please. If there's an amendment, when would this group start? When would they end? When would the recommendations be coming forward? When would this disband group, if at all, disband? So there's some gaps in the floor amendment that, in my humble opinion, needs to be closed. Let
Yeah.
alone what
Yeah,
Bassinet said.
Go ahead, Chief of Staff.
So if you would like to have a working group of 15 members, or even, yeah, so let's go even. So we'll split the membership, so say 20 members with 10 selected by the administration and 10 selected by city council. And whether that's council participating on that or not, that's fine. That's whatever you guys choose. I don't know if you want to put that in the hands of the president or the chairman of this committee. So you need to, that's other language that could be added. In addition to that, you may want to wrap this up by that January deadline, so you have another 6 months if something comes up that you need to address. So have the recommendations in by the working group by January 2024.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson had a couple comments.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate the input, especially the members of the public who have engaged or even called previously. This is a very important topic, and what I worry about as we sit here is I worry about at a point. So DNREC now has recommended that we go shift by 2027 to curbing the percentage of gas fuel cars. By 2035, DNREC is recommending regulations right now that all sales of gas vehicles stop in the state. What I'm worried about is not, no offense, but like 40 acres, other neighborhoods, people have the resources. When I'm already thinking ahead is how we're gonna get this EV stations to work in neighborhoods that are underserved. And that's where I start from. That's my North Star, is that we gotta get this to everyone. We gotta get rebates so people can even buy these vehicles. As Councilmember Oliver said, it's gonna be a problem having access to these vehicles. So we gotta have some grants. DNREC, I know, was offering grants to actually install charging stations. That's one thing I think the working group could look at, is maybe lobbying the state for increased grants for city residents to get these plugs installed, because I think my understanding about, they could be $1,500 or more, and so that's something residents don't have. So as we're thinking ahead, what does it look like? This is just the residential piece, but we also need them in commercial spaces. We need them in our parks. We need them in vacant garages, possibly. So there's a lot of filling in gaps. We can't solve everything today, and that's my point, as our chairwoman said, we cannot solve everything today. But the thing is, if you don't try, you fail. So you gotta continue to try. We're gonna need to continue to move our forward. We have a light under our pants, and we have hard deadlines, as Chief of Staff Washington said. By this working group will need to meet and get the recommendation in by January 1st. So I hear everyone, and I do want to be respectful to the drafters, as I was in the early conversations with the administration, not on drafting the legislation, but going back last year, a year ago, we met on this issue. So, you know, those council members who weren't engaged, that's on them. They could have called the administration, they could have engaged, they could have taken time out of their day to engage on this issue. So I don't want to put it on the administration. Each council member has the power to engage administration on any issue. So, you know, that's, you know, I want to make sure the narrative is set correctly for the public to see. But we have to step up. As a city, I think this raised attention. Now, we got all eyes on us. We got to step up. But I know I have trust in my colleagues that we'll get this right, well, certainly, and I appreciate everyone's support. We're going to work on this and working on getting into the underserved community, because that's really what I'm worried about as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chairwoman,
Thank
as
you.
I'm not on the committee, but with
Yeah,
the
thank
motion.
you, Councilman Johnson. And he was supposed to leave here at 7 to make it to a community meeting that only meets quarterly. I hope they understand why he's not there. And Councilmember McCoy is also trying to get to one. And I don't know if anybody's going to make it to these meetings tonight. I do want to add that aside from whatever we put out of this committee today, if it makes it out of committee, is that we still have time before this goes before council on a vote to introduce floor amendments on the floor and maybe add some other things that will make council more comfortable on voting this out. With that, I have Councilmember Fields on the line, and then we have to take this to a vote. Oh, she removed her hand? Okay, so at this point, I would like to move an ordinance to amend, an ordinance 23-027 to amend Chapter 42 of the Wilmington City Code to permit persons residing in certain residential property to use, install, and maintain curbside charging cords and electric vehicle charging stations in the public right-of-way. Introducing two amendments, that there would be a working group of members selected by both City Council and the administration, where each will select 10 members for this working group, and they will study this ordinance and remove, and suggest changes and adjustments before the effective date, which would be effective July 1st, 2024.
January 1st. No.
The recommendations would be due January 1st, 2024, but the law, then we will make it effective. That'll be a second one. And the recommendations would be received by January 1st, 2024. Can I get a,
Yeah, make a motion to move that amendment.
can I get a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and second, and we will do a roll call vote. Cabrera
Madam Chair,
is
this
yes.
just on the amendment, correct?
Spadola? This is just on the amendment.
Yes, on the amendment.
Yes on the amendment. Councilmember Fields? Oh, yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember McCoy?
Yes.
Councilmember Field?
Yes.
Councilmember Darby?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Council President Congo?
Yes.
Thank you. It has been properly adopted, the amendment for the working group. The second amendment is that the legislation, after taking the recommendations from the working group and enacting them, it will not be until July 1st of 2024. Can we get a second on that?
Yes, I make a motion, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Make a motion to move that amendment.
Second.
It's been properly moved in second. We will do another roll call vote. Cabrera is a yes. Councilman Field?
Yes.
Councilman McCoy?
Yes.
Fields? Councilmember Fields? Councilmember Spadola?
Yes on the amendment.
Councilmember Darby?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Councilmember Congo?
Yes.
Councilmember Fields? Oh, okay, we have.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we have the two amendments now presented, and now, we have to vote on that Okay,
Yes.
so now with those two amendments, we will take a vote on moving the resolution out of committee to go into the council meeting the first Thursday of July.
Ordinance.
The ordinance as
An ordinance with the amendment, ordinance 23-027, to amend Chapter 42 of Wilmington City Code to permit persons residing in certain residential property to use, install, and maintain curbside charging cords and electric vehicle charging stations in the public right-of-way.
So moved on that ordinance.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second. We will do another roll call vote. Cabrera is a yes. Councilman Field?
Yes.
Councilwoman McCoy?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fields?
Yes.
Councilman Spadola?
No.
Councilmember Darby?
No.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
And Council President Congo?
No.
Thank you. The yeas have it, and we will hear this the first Thursday in July with these amendments and any others that we might make on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. The next item, and we will move through this very quickly, ordinance 23-017, an ordinance to amend Chapter 41 of the City Code to permit the use of parapet signs. The sponsor is Councilman Johnson. And I would like to thank everyone who came to speak to this today, especially the public. Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
I'll make this brief. This is an ordinance actually that I have to give kudos to Westside Grows. This has been brought to my attention. There was an issue with many store owners. We have a facade program for businesses, small businesses on the west side. I know it affects Councilmember McCoy and Councilmember Fields' district. We're giving them money for improvements in signs, but then we were finding there's limitations on our code books for signage. So credit to Westside Grows, and of course, Al and I were working with us on this. This is again making sure that we can get the proper signage so that our businesses can improve their look. That can expand their stream of revenue and make sure foot traffic gets through. So I believe I have Commissioner Starkey here. If you mind just briefly sharing with us. I know we walked last summer and talked about this issue. So I'm thankful for your team for helping us address this issue.
Again, Jeff Starkey, Director of Land Use and Planning. This is something in the code. As you may not know, our sign code hasn't been updated for over 20 years. So this was a particular instance where a constituent came and wanted to put up a sign, a parapet sign. And unfortunately, our code doesn't address parapet signs, so we went
Could
through
you
the code.
please define that type of sign?
Parapet sign?
Yes.
Parapet is a wall extending above the roof. This sign would attach to that parapet, and our code doesn't address parapet. So again, our sign code hasn't been revised in over 20 years. So we went back, looked at the code, and included some language that will address parapet signs.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Starkey. And this would apply citywide, so any improvement a business wants to do to have signage with lights, is that what parapet means? It's kind of for the everyday citizen, something with lights, something that stands out a little bit more so customers can see.
Right. Again, the parapet is the extension of the roof, the wall that goes above the roof. Typically, they're 30 inches. This sign would attach to the parapet wall. And again, our code didn't address parapet signs, so we in turn came back and modified our code so we could address parapet signs.
And as just a quick, brief follow-up, Commissioners, and would that still have to go through Planning Commission for approval of that sign once the applicant applies?
It depends on what district it's located in. It'll also go through building permit review and so forth. So all the other items would apply to the requirements.
Okay, and then parapet sign is an example like an old time, like ice cream parlor, like the light. Like, is that maybe an example of what an old
Well, there are
time
different
store-
variations of parapet. You know, there could be a flat sign with lights attached to it. So there could be lit sign as well. So depends on what they submit.
It's
We'll
basically
review it.
going to be 2.5, maybe almost 3 feet above the roof. basically is what it is. Anything that goes above the roof structure
It's
is
attached to
considered a parapet sign.
parapet
I've
wall,
stopped
right.
talking about ice cream.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner Starkey.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee?
That would be me.
Thank you, Councilman White. Proceed.
The 80 miles per hour limit, where did that come from?
The building code, the wind speed.
Is that the newest built?
We're on the 2018 building code.
And that's the
ICC.
same, that's the same as the dead load and other requirements?
Yes,
And that'll talk about the attachment thereof to the
that is
wall?
correct.
And you're recommending the approval of this legislation?
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members from the committee? Any council members that are not on the committee that have any comments or questions? Are there any hands raised? Nope. Not seeing any, I will take a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Fields.
Councilmember Fields.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields. Okay, so we are going to move forward with ordinance. Can I get a motion for ordinance 23-017 and ordinance to amend chapter 41 of the city code to permit the use of parapet signs?
Motion made.
Second.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second, and we'll take this to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, it has passed, and this will go into one of the 2 July meetings. Is that correct, Ms. Bass-Knight?
Yes, July 6th.
Okay, oh, well, we didn't ask for public comment, but there was no hands raised. Was anyone here from the public? Thank you, sorry about that. All righty, moving on to council member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for hanging out here with us. Okay, so the next item, Councilmember Johnson, are all your items have been addressed?
thank you.
Even though you're not going to make your meeting now? All right, the next item is substitute 1 to ordinance 23-018, an ordinance to amend chapter 34 of the city code to allow residential tenants in the city properties to deposit withheld rent in a city-held escrow. And the sponsor is Councilmember McCoy. Speak to your legislation, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This legislation we actually had to bring back. We were already in committee and it left committee last month. But after having a conversation with a group that brought some things to my attention, we had to go back and do some more tweaks. But also, then also today, we received information and more questions I was asked by one of our local landlords who's actually very active with coming to the meetings and such, and making certain that we're aware of how things look from his angle. We made a few more adjustments, so I actually have a revision, and I wanted to know whether or not should I do the revision now and then go into exactly what this is, or go into it first?
Yeah, she can make the floor amendment now.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so, all right, let me pull it back up. No
No, go ahead. No, you
problem.
answered that.
I'm sorry.
After 8
just
PM,
be
we can
phone-
be a little informal.
I'm telling you, man. I'm glad I thought I was gonna be out of juice for a minute. Okay, so, all right, I would like to make a floor amendment to the substitute number 1 to ordinance 23-08. We will begin at page 2. Let's see. So it'll be section 34-151, and we'll go down to C number 5. So what we're going to do is we are going to cross out or 5308, and then the next line underneath that A, we are going to add lack of, we put it hot water then heat first, and then we crossed out hot water. I don't know why I did it that way. So as it will read, there is a lack of hot water, heat, water, electricity, or conditions exist that materially deprives a tenant of a substantial part of the benefit of the tenant's bargains. Then this is another added part. After that comma, we're going to put a comma there instead of a period, as defined in 25 del C 5308, wherein the landlord has 48 hours to make repairs. So what that is referencing something from the Delaware State landlord rental codes. The next amendment is going to be in the section D, right underneath of it, in number 4. We're going to add one. We're adding number 4. And what it should state is, the tenant shall continue to put money into the escrow account, the escrow until A, a court adjudicates the matter, or B, the landlord and tenant submit a joint affidavit certifying the release of funds. That is the end of my amendments.
Thank you.
So,
Are there any questions from council members? Or do we have to vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendments first, unless there's any questions from council members? Okay.
So move.
Thank you. Okay. Can I get a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved in second. We will vote on the amendment. All in favor, respond with saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Okay, so it has been,
Thank
it has been passed. The amendments have been passed. We
Right.
can-
So, thank you. So, Madam Chair, if I can continue?
Yes, you may
All right,
continue,
thank you.
please.
So, just to bring it back to remembrance, this is the escrow program. What it has turned into is the voluntary rent escrow program. There were stipulations that were in here previously for the city of Wilmington where we could not, there was not a process that we were able to use at that time because we no longer have municipal court. So because of that, we had to make some changes. We actually deleted quite a bit from here and actually simplified the program. What this will do is it will actually give the tenant like pretty much like a safe deposit, a space to put 2/3 of their rent into escrow, as they have already contacted their landlord, made them aware of what the repairs need to be. Those repairs, once that landlord has been contacted with a written request, and then also L&I will be going through with an affidavit, making certain that these are legitimate requests. All those things actually take place before an escrow account can begin. So we just wanted to make certain that as I brought the information back to the committee again, we stated a timeline on here, so we made certain that when it comes to emergency issues, that it was a 48-hour, and that is basically something that referenced the state. And then also making certain that, what was the other thing that we made certain we added? Oh, then also making certain that we had a timeline on when it comes to how long you'll be paying the escrow. We wanted to make certain that that the tenant is able to pay the escrow until we get some clarity or a repair made by the landlord.
Thank you, Councilmember McCoy. Are there any questions from members of council that are here present? Councilmember White and myself? Anybody online that has a question? Anybody from the committee? Nobody else? Just Councilmember Harley, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I think I already asked to be added as a co-sponsor of this legislation. It's definitely a good piece of legislation, as we know of the situation that happened on Adams Street. With legislation in place like this, I think it supersedes whatever we currently have on the books, because there was supposed to have been a similar provision already on the books or in the code. However, I do think that this definitely takes it to another level. So thank you, Councilmember McCoy, for sponsoring this legislation.
Thank you, Councilmember
And,
Harley.
that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I promise you're next. I too would like to be added as a co-sponsor, and I've always known that there was an escrow program. I'm just surprised that it was never enacted or enforced, but people should have protections where they can still continue to be compliant and pay their rent, but landlords should not be able to pocket the money if they're not able to make the repairs and hold up to their business transaction. So I definitely want to be added as a sponsor. Anyone else? As the sponsor, you have the last word.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't know whether or not there was anyone in the public, but I just wanted to add that this did start basically from what was going on Adams Street, when we had a lot of our residents were displaced because of that, and we just wanted to make certain that once that happened, that the city provided another tool The escrow program has actually been, in effect for some time, but there was no real process to get anything started. And so that's what this was. It's completing this piece of legislation, also an affidavit, and then even researching the escrow account for the treasurer to make certain that we did still have an account for it. I just wanted to make people aware in that State Representative Dorsey Walker, she's actually has a piece of legislation that may be coming out soon. Hopefully, it will get the votes that it needs. From what I understand, it has left the committee, and we're just hoping that once it gets to the floor, it gets the votes that it needs. If that happens, we may not need this, but this is just to make certain that we are taking care of our residents if she is unable to get those things accomplished.
Thank you very much. And there is such a thing as rule of law, so if we, as a city, need to do this, we will do it. With that said, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this? Okay. So at this point, I make a motion to move an ordinance to amend Chapter 34 of the City Code to allow residential tenants in the city of properties to deposit withheld rent in a city-held escrow account with the amendments that have already been enacted.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second on the motion.
It has been properly moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. This will be heard in the one of the July meetings. And moving right along, we are going to the last two items on the agenda. And the first is a resolution to convey 2 parcels in the South Market Street right-of-way to the Riverfront Development Corporation. Sponsor is Councilmember Harley. You may speak to this. Are you muted, Councilmember Harley?
Yes, I'm muted.
Okay, now unmute, and now you can proceed to speak on your first piece of legislation.
Okay, so the resolution to approve the grant of a walkway easement?
Yes, yes.
Or is it to convey the 2 parcels in the South Market
The
Street?
first
I'm
one
sorry.
is, I'm sorry, because we did go out of order. It's a resolution to convey 2 parcels in the South Market Street right-of-way to the Riverfront Development Corporation.
Okay, so, is Megan McGlinchey, on the line?
I'm here.
Yes, she is. Miss Megan McGlinchey, you may speak to
Okay,
this.
all right, I'm gonna, defer it to Megan.
Thank you. Proceed, Megan.
Thanks, Councilmember. The resolution is pretty straightforward. There are 2 very small pieces of property that sit along South Market Street, basically right at the intersection of South Market and Howard. It sits on the western side of South Market Street, and there we would like to take those pieces of property and make them part of the South Market Street master plan, the Riverfront East property. It's currently right-of-way that is unused by the city, and the Department of Real Estate has determined that it is surplus property and would not be needed in the future for public use.
Thank you.
So happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone from council have any questions?
I wanted to speak after Megan, if it's okay, Madam Chair.
Yes, you may. Go ahead. You may proceed, Councilmember Harley.
Thank you. Yes, so I had the opportunity to have conversation with Megan and to ask the questions that I wanted answered in terms of making sure that these were not parcels that were being utilized. And we definitely had a in-depth conversation, not only about the parcels, but she also shared a map with me, because the original map, I was not able to fully understand where that parcel was located. And I just wanted to say thanks to her for making sure that I had the right map. I was able to look at the parcel and to see that it's definitely not a parcel that the city uses. It's not being utilized by the city, and therefore is willing to convey the properties over to the RDC. So I just wanted to share that I'm in support of this legislation.
Thank you, Councilmember Harley. Any other members of council that have any questions, concerns? Okay, seeing no, okay, Councilmember McCoy?
All right, thank you. So, you stated that the city actually does not use this, this parcel. I was just wondering, so we are the owners of it? This is just, land that's basically storing stuff, the way I look at it. I'm looking it up on the MapQuest now.
Yeah, it's actually used as right-of-way. So it's when you're coming down South Market Street, it's just two very small strips of green space that have traditionally been considered right-of-way.
Okay.
Great.
So there's nothing on those properties currently.
Thank you. That's the only question I had.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, at this point, I will entertain a motion. Oh, actually, we do not need to, it's a resolution, so we don't need to vote on this. And that will be held before council. The next resolution is approving the grant of a walkway easement and a temporary construction easement to the Frary Charter School, Wilmington, Inc. And the sponsor is Councilmember Harley. You may proceed to speak to this.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to know if the representative from Freer School is on the line.
Oh.
He's here.
I guess not.
No,
Oh, he's here.
no, he's here. He's here in person,
Is he-
and I wish I had known because somehow
all right,
I would
great,
have.
Thanks. I'm gonna defer it over to him, and then I have my remarks.
Yes, I do apologize because I kept looking at you. I didn't know what you were here to speak on. Most of the council members had asked me to try to put their, if they had people here to put them first on the agenda, I certainly would have had you go in there somewhere. So thank you for your patience. We owe you.
Thank you very much. My name is David Singleton. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Frary Charter School. We are located on 14th Street in Wilmington. I know some of you are very familiar with the school. It's a high school that serves primarily students from low-income families, and it's focused on bringing those kids, those children ready to go to college. And our graduating classes have sent about over 90% of the graduates have gone on to college. So we think it's a very wonderful record. One thing we have not had is a gymnasium. And it just seems a little unfair that all of our nice high schools for upper income students have their gyms and we don't have one. So we have put together the resources to buy a vacant building next door to the school, vacant building at 205 West 14th Street. And we are actually in the process of starting to convert an office space into a gym. And that involves some interesting challenges. For instance, a gym needs a ceiling 25 feet high and an office has a ceiling 9 feet high. So we're popping the roof up and knocking columns off. So the one problem that we would ask your help with is that the fire code requires us to have a certain number of exits. And we have an exit door on the side of the building that will suffice, but it needs a walkway outside that's 3 feet wide. And we don't have quite enough space. We're about 18 inches short. So we're looking for an easement that's about 18 inches wide and 40 feet long on which we would build a walkway. There'll be nothing else built there. And this would be enclosed with a fence that would chattel people around to the back of the school. This is on city-owned land that's part of Brandywine Park, but actually managed by the state. My understanding is that the appropriate people in the city and the state have signed off on this. We have met with Midtown Brandywine with Councilman Harley's presence and laid out to them, and they asked for a number of conditions about how this would be used, that it would be enclosed with a fence, that the door leading to this would be have an alarm on it, so it couldn't be used for other purposes other than as an exit. If I have drawings of it, if you'd like to see them. I know it's been a long night for all of you, so if you don't want to see them.
They're in our packet, so they did give us the drawings in the packet.
So that's what we're asking for the resolution, approving that. We have not To my knowledge, and Councilwoman Harley may know differently, we've not heard from the Midtown Brandywine Neighborhood Association. We would expect their support or hope for their support because we have complied with all of the conditions they requested.
Well, I can tell you that I remember when the first focus groups were held to see if there was an interest for the school, and I attended, and I was very much supportive of that, and friends of mine have had their children attend there, so I thank you for the work that you're doing over there, and even though, you know, you have the park and a few amenities, it is nice to have a gym, so certainly an easement like this should not stop the children from having those breaks, and exercise for the body is just as important as exercise for the mind. Again, I just feel terrible because I would have had you speak earlier in between all of that, but hopefully you enjoyed our meeting and see how business is done in the city.
Well, I must confess that I worked for the city of Wilmington from 1971 to 1984, ending up as chief of staff under Mayor McLaughlin. So I have been to perhaps 1,000 city council and committee meetings and council meetings, and so I appreciate what you do. It's not an easy job, and you get lots of phone calls and lots of people asking questions and making demands, and I always respect council members for that work. So I've seen it before.
Well, thank you. That explains why you were so patient and you didn't have any expressions on your face. So at this point, are there any questions that council members have? Councilmember McCoy?
Well, so I just wanted to make certain I was just reading this right. You have a grant to create the easement. You just wanted to get the city of Wilmington's permission in order to put it down, to lay it or something?
Well, we need the city to grant us an easement because part of this walkway would be on city-owned land.
Right.
So we're asking for an easement to build the walkway over that land, about 1.5 feet by 40 feet. We're also asking for a temporary construction easement so that the people building that walkway can be standing in where they're allowed to. We're also offering to plant a number of trees, which is one of the things that Midtown Brandywine asked for. They would actually not be on the easement. They would be on the city parkland adjacent, and we're glad to do that.
Okay. Yes. May I follow?
Yes, you may
All right,
follow up.
thank you. So yeah, I do know where I actually got a chance to finally visit Friary last year. Mr. Nathan Moser, great class. I remember exactly where you were put, so I understand where you sat and what's behind it. So I have understanding. I was just confused because it sounded something more like a variance of some sort that you were requesting, but you gave me a little bit more clarity. That's why I was like, why is he here with this?
No.
Okay.
This would be actually necessary to put us in compliance with the fire code.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I have no.
we're talking 18 inches here.
Yeah. Basically.
Okay, are there any other questions from council members? Any other comments from Councilmember Harley before we proceed?
Yes, I would just like to reiterate that the resolution approves the city's grant of an easement to the Freer Charter School, Wilmington Incorporated, in Brandywine Park to accommodate the construction and maintenance of an exit and walkway required by the fire marshal, as well as a temporary construction easement to build the exit and walkway. And as it has already been mentioned, that the community has worked with the school and they shared their, what they would like, their conditions, as it has already been mentioned. And we revised the legislation to incorporate it, make sure that they read it. And so I feel as though we did our due diligence. So that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Harley. Since this is a resolution, it does not have to be voted out of committee, but it will be heard before City Council in one of the July meetings. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your patience. And now the most important motion of this evening is, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, before the motion to adjourn, may I make a last comment?
Can I have a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed and would like to stay here longer? Not hearing any, this meeting has been adjourned. Thank you. Keep it under the threat of the tornado.